This broadcast of the Competizione Performance League World Series is brought to you by Malwa Transport, oversized cargo and trucking logistics specialists of Quebec. Visit their website on www.malwa-transport.ca. Good evening, race fans, and welcome back to TRTN for tonight's coverage of Round 8 of the Competizione Performance League World Series, powered by Malwa Transport and live exclusively here on TRTN. As always, I'm Regan Clark. You join us here in the land down under as we head into the final couple of rounds of the World Series here in Bathurst, New South Wales, Australia, at the Mount Panorama Circuit. Founded in 1938, comprised of 23 turns and 6.2 kilometres, that's 3.8 miles of FIA Grade 3. It sees racing from the Australian Supercars Championship, formerly the Australian Touring Cars Championship, under the veil of the Bathurst 1000. It also sees racing under the Intercontinental GT Challenge as the Bathurst 12 Hour, sometimes also called the Maguire's Bathurst 12 Hour. It also sees the Bathurst 6 Hour as the newer of two events to have been introduced from 2016 onwards. You used to see racing from TCR World Tour, as well as, before the time and after the advent of Formula One, the Australian Grand Prix in 1938, 1947, 1952, and 1958. It is a fantastic circuit to be at here, one of our favourites here on TRTN, and a track that is ultimately governed above all instinct by fear. The drivers will be up against it more so than any other circuit in circulation here at Mount Panorama. Some have described it as a mixture of Macau and the Nürburgring, I believe it was, in some analogies, and really that expression could not be truer here. This is a tough circuit, very uncompromising and very, very tight around the edges. Very little room for runoff for these drivers today. It's going to have to be perfection to grant wins in today's 2-hour race to follow. Taking a look at where we left off in our last visit to the championship, then in the second of three 3x40s this season, when we went to Barcelona last weekend, we found 3 back-to-back wins for Christian Lebay, bringing his current win tally up to 5 from 2 the round before. It also gave us 3 brand new winners in the AM category with Joey Fisher, Danny Felix, and Cedric Grenier-Massey. It was an action-packed triple header of rounds at round 7 of the championship, and today looks to be no exemption. Coming back in to the 2-hour format, taking a look into the session regs for today before we discuss the championship standings and where we're at so far with them. Coming back in to the 2-hour format, we're coming to the last 10 minutes of this free practice session, of which I'm told there will be a reset just before the run of 30 minutes of qualifying, then 2 hours of racing with 2 mandatory pit stops for fuel and a pit window of 90 minutes, meaning it'll open up after the first 15 minutes and close 15 minutes before the end of the race. Beginning the talks then on championship standings, starting things off in the teams championships in Pro. Malwa Racing now lead over 5 Star Esports by nearly double, with 610 points to their 342. They're not far off the chances of doubling that by the end of this season. Clutch Kick Motorsports moves to 3rd ahead of Black Nitro Racing, who are a single point up from Euro Titans Endurance at the back of the top 5. Velocity Racing in 6th place, with their chances to change with the return of Zalan Such to the field. Fortune Racing in 7th and Garage 93 in 8th. Detosto Moto 9th and Clemanio Racing in 10th. Nexus in 11th. Race Revolution in 12th. PRL in 13th and Vortex in 14th. Then in the AM category, Hokianos continue their lead over the Malwa Racing AM division, with Let's Race Mate moving to 3rd, Flora Engineering to 4th, and Tomcats dropping to 5th. Fora de Curva in 6th, up and ahead of Team Raceline, now 7th, Pinnacle Endurance Racing in 8th, Breaking Point Racing in 9th, and Presidential Racers round out a newly found top 10 for the team's championship. Taking a look at the drivers then, as we continue to follow on board with last week's triple header race winner, Christian Lebay, 3 on the trot to keep him in the lead of the championship, beginning the conversations on the talks of the pro standings. Lebay leads confidently over Tangway in 2nd, with Wright now in 3rd place. Taking a look a little further down the order to reveal that Franca, now in 4th place, stays up and ahead of Brooklyn Donkin, but that gap is narrowing by the round here. Only 4 points away now is Brooklyn Donkin of Euro Titans Endurance at the back of the top 5. Kyle Jenkins with 5 Star Esports in 6th place ahead of Zalan Such, with Velocity Racing in 7th. Ben Cheeseman in 8th with 156 points to his name. It's Stefan Nikolai in 9th place with 132 points. Rafael Bayer rounds out the top 10 with 102. Taking a look away from the pros and into the AM standings, Richard Cecil continues to lead now 80 points clear over Sergio Belda in second place. In third, Ivan Sanchez of Holkianos Motorsport, and Andrew Veldkamp of the Malwar Racing AM division makes fourth. Behind him, another Holkianos driver, JM Quito, rounding out the top five with 178 points. Joey Fisher reveling in his first victory of the season, now a single point away from the top five with 177 points. He's 5 points clear of Christophe Dupois in seventh. Didier Potvin makes eighth by a single point away. And then we see Cedric Grenier-Massé also reveling from his first victory this season, now in and amongst the top 10, 30 points clear of Everaldo dos Santos in 10th place. It's set to be an action-packed round here of the World Series, and we've been following on board with Labé for the longest time as he currently tops the timing charts and is looking to return into even more chances of race wins, following 3 on the trot in Barcelona last weekend. But he'll have stiff competition here from not only Zalan Such, who returns to the field in the number 45, but Brooklyn Donkin, who now marks third place by half a second out. Taking a look at balance of performance then for today's session, we find Aston Martin still lightest in class, so that'll be great news for Karina Stinson in the number 800 V12 Vantage, still 40 kilos lighter than factory weight. Ferrari will be seeing significant boost to performance today, 25 kilos shed away from the 296. That's great news for drivers like Joey Fisher and Kyle Jenkins. It is worth noting in the case of Fisher, currently absent from today's grid. Nissan loses 17 kilos, with BMW losing 16, Mercedes losing 11, and Aston Martin losing 7. Lamborghini lose 3, Bentley gain 2, Porsche gain 8, and McLaren also gaining 8. It's Ford that'll find themselves up and against it with 20 kilos on board, but that's still not stopped Labé from going a quarter of a second faster than the Lexus of Zalan Such. Following in here then as we approach the last couple of minutes of free practice. Qualifying predictions coming up around the corner into that session. Of course, 30 minutes of qualifying for this round of the championship. And taking a look at where we're at on the calendar here, only 3 more rounds left to go. We'll be coming back in with these guys for the last of the 3x40 rounds next week on May 16th. That's part of a triple header of broadcasts we have going live from HCCL, Competizione Performance League, and the finale of the Shooting Stars Cup by Race Club UK. That's all live next Saturday, May 16th, 2026. Then the week after that, May 23rd, we go live from the Nürburgring for the season finale of the Competizione Performance League World Series Season 1. As we just see there in the background, was a huge knock for that of Zalan Such, mirroring much of the same incident that befell Marvin Kirchhofer at the 2020 Bathurst 12-hour. You see, making their way out of the paddock at the moment appears to be one of the Malwar Racing Mustangs, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, that is Andrew Veldkamp we see on his way out of the paddock. Once we've got the opportunity, 2 minutes left to go, let's see if we can go and catch on board with the driver just about to start their next flying lap. As it would happen, that appears to be the number 26 of JM Quito. So let's go and locate him at this time. We follow on here with JM Quito starting their next flying lap here at the Mount Panorama circuit. Now, breaking everything down on what is a monstrous circuit such as this, very, very difficult to break everything down here. Starting things off at Hell Corner, immediately onto the ascent up through the Mountain Straight. This is the shorter of 2 straights here. The Mountain Straight currently ranking in 1.111 kilometers. The Conrod Straight, which will be out a little later on, is 1.9 kilometers. Making our way through to turn 2, then Griffin's Bend. And this uphill section will comprise a good third of the track here, if not closer to a half for these drivers. Now up through the cuttings, turns 3 and 4. We've seen things get very hairy on the race start down through this section. It's where the track really starts to narrow up from Sector 1 into Sector 2. We go now on the run up through Quarry Corner, now up through Reed Park, now through Frog Hollow, up towards Solman Park. You can see there to the right-hand side, the Wall of Death, up through to McPhillamy. As we're now up over the crest of the hill and we begin the run down it in towards Brock Skyline. Down at turns 11 and 12 into the S's and the Dipper. You see here the Dipper through to the S's. Very easy to ping pong off the walls here. And we see exactly where that comes into play down at Forest's Elbow for that of JM Quito, mirroring much of the same of what I believe happened for, I'm trying to remember here, I think it was Chaz Mostert at the 2015 Bathurst 1000. He did much of the same incident there, and we see troubles here out through the chase of the 616. Andrew Veldkamp in trouble, leaving us without much of a track guide left here. with the Mustangs having been wiped out in the trailing end of free practice. We'll have to wait into the talks of qualifying to give ourselves the full track tour. We see Stefan Nikolai is out lapping the track at the moment, up through the run of things at Quarry Corner, up through Frog Hollow into Reed into Frog Hollow, now through Solomon and McPhillamy, up towards Brock Skyline. So we might actually have a chance here, following on with Nikolai. He slingshots downhill here through Brock Skyline, named after Australian touring car legend Peter Brock. Through the dipper into the S as we go. We saw it caught out JM Keto, and it very much so looks to catch out Stefan Nikolai, but he holds it. Can he keep himself on the wall? No, sadly, not this time around. That's a really killer section for these drivers because they're coming up over a crest. And that's where things are really going to become quite a challenge for them. So, qualifying now officially underway. 30 minutes here at play at Mount Panorama. We see first among the fray, as it would appear, is Richard Cecil. Let's go to catch on board with the Porsche leading the fray here. Richard Cecil, of course, at the forefront of things in the AM Championship standings. Leads over Sergio Belda at this time. Oh, yes, I forgot about this one. Just give me a moment. We are going through that mandated reset. Give us just a second. Got ahead of myself there. We're still looking quite forward to the qualifying session, but back in just a moment. So we're back into the session here. We've got about 5 minutes now before the start of qualifying. And in that time, we do just want to quickly clarify one slight change here. There was a bit of a discrepancy in the reporting of the AM standings. Now, I think it was just pertaining to one driver here. That was Sergio Belda. Now you can see the up-to-date standings. Sergio Belda doesn't have 212 points. That was last round. He has, as a matter of fact, he has 261. So the gap is a lot closer than we previously believed here. You can now see the what should be fully up-to-date standings. That was just one little error that slipped on through. But again, this speaks volumes for the kind of performance that Cecil is going to have to pull out today. It was 12th, 15th, and 2nd in Barcelona. A real mixed bag. When you put that up against Sergio Belda, 15th, 3rd, and 9th, that's what's allowed him to gain the ground back up towards that of Richard Cecil. The two find themselves separate at this time by 31 points in the championship. So it's going to be very, very close between the pair on the run in towards this 1X120. We do, I believe, have a driver still out on track, and it once again appears to be that of Stefan Nikolai. The early bird gets the proverbial worm in this case, and he's sighting around the track at the moment. You see there, big slide, so narrowly avoids pinging back into the wall of death down at Solomon and McPhillamy. That was super, super close. And this is really one of the highlights of Mount Panorama as a circuit. It is super sketchy. It is a who dares wins kind of circuit. This section here has caught so many out because you can see the drivers are coming into this with quite a fair deal of speed. And if they're still turning by the time they hit that crest, the back end's going light and the car is going into a wall. As we saw from both JM Keto and Stefan Nikolai, you can see the third time's the charm here for that 55 on his second go into that corner. Now showing what ought to happen. He has to keep things nice and straight for the run in towards Forest's Elbow. As we now make our way down the Conrod Straight in towards the chase. A heavy braking zone here. We've seen plenty of overtaking opportunities come up in this area of the track. Out through turn 22 in towards turn 23 at Murray's Corner. It was a sketchy sighting lap there for the Romanian talent, but still scouting the track, trying to make sure he's got absolutely everything dead to rights before he gets in towards qualifying today. Now we're about 2 minutes before that session starts, in line with the mandated reset from race control, just to make sure the servers are up to scratch here. We did have a few issues with the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series earlier last week. You may be wondering why there was no coverage of it this week. That's because that round has once again been postponed due to weather concerns surrounding the area of the server where the server farm is located for this particular server used for the GT4 Pro-Am Cup was in an area of quite a heavy amount of weather. There was the threat of power cuts, power outages, and that would have subsequently cancelled the race on site. But as far as we know, it will be going back up and ahead. So that's the penultimate round, if we're not mistaken, there of the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series Season 3. We'll be going live with that Wednesday morning, 1 a.m. BST. That'll be 9 p.m. EST on the Tuesday. Oh, into the wall there, up off of his side. Stefan Nikolai catapulted down through Skyline. Get a look at this here. Absolutely devastating what happened for him there. The back end went light. I think we could see it here. Going into Skyline. He's got onto the brakes. There's a little bump there. The back end's gone light. Clatters the wall. On his side. Hits the roof. Back onto all four wheels. That is a mangled Mercedes. Had ever I seen one. As we drop into the last 30 seconds of free practice. The 55 retires to the pit lane. Getting ready to go then for quali. Looking up through the order then, that grid's taken a bit of a mix-up now, as we find here for Richard Cecil. He was actually one of the furthest up the field for the start. Now finds himself trailing in behind. We'll check to see in, though, with that 119. We're about 6 seconds out from the start of qualifying. 30 minutes of quali coming up around the corner here in Bathurst. We see nice, bright, sunny conditions. And I would say this is somewhat of an Australian mild heat we're seeing, because especially by their standards, this is actually somewhat on the colder end. 23 degrees on track, 16 ambient. When you consider Australian summertime heat is some of the hottest in the world, this is certainly somewhat of a breath of respite here for these drivers, not having to face up against temperatures well north of 30 to 40 degrees. I really would pray to see what those Pirellis would be looking like after even a few laps in that qualifying session. As we see the first two drivers out among the fray then is Christian Lebay and Zalan Such making their way up through the cutting. So taking a look at qualifying predictions for today. Lebay predicted at pole with Wright second, Donkin third, Jenkins fourth and Tanguay in fifth, Cheeseman in sixth, Cecil seventh, Veldkamp in eighth, Miles in ninth and Potvin in 10th. That's of the data we were able to scrape up over the course of this session. You could see there's quite a noticeable drop-off out past fifth place. We dropped from the 201s into the immediate 202s, then the 204s, then the 206, then the 207. And that's where a lot of drivers have started struggling, especially in these final two sectors of the track. I'd say more so than anything is that middle sector. It is absolutely killer. You see then with Lebay, Zalan Such on his tail. Of course, that data erroneously leaves out the 45 from the mix, and I have no doubt in my mind the Hungarian talent will give us plenty to speak of over the course of today's session, making our way down the Conrod Straight. Now, this is going to be the domain, really, of Ford and Lexus in the straights here on the run down through to the chase at turns 20, 21, and 22. We've seen so far Ford has had quite an exemplary performance in Bathurst in our last couple of visits. Our previous visit to the Mount Panorama circuit in just strictly GT3s, if I'm not mistaken, was back in the NLRL Sunday League Season 5, the doubleheader that went on to be won both times by Carlos Disch, driving at the time for Ford. So starting the first of their flying laps is Christian Lebay. We'll stay on board with him over the course of this event. Well, over the course of this lap for this event. So up the mountain straight we go, about 5.1 seconds after Zalan Such gave himself a bit of breathing space for the start of these flying laps. Up towards turn 2 at Griffin's Bend. Precision is at the forefront of concern for these drivers. This is one of the least forgiving circuits to lap. On most other venues, grade 1 and grade 2 alike, there is plenty of runoff space, plenty of forgiveness to be found, especially when we take a look at some of the circuits we've been to in the last couple of weeks. You know, you take a look back to circuits like Barcelona, you take a look back to circuits like Paul Ricard, for that matter as well, Watkins Glen, Imola, the Red Bull Ring, Spa, all very forgiving. Bathurst is none of those things. In fact, that bit of gravel you just saw there through McPhillamy, that's as good as it's getting. Because that's the only section of the track designed to make you stop. The rest, if you're going too fast into it, you'll know soon enough why that was a mistake when you're head first into the tyre wall. Out through turn 18 here, Forest's Elbow. The road widens just a little bit here on the run down the Conrod Straight. We see in the background there was the Lexus. Now 6.2 seconds from LeBay, so definitely positive indications here that LeBay is on for an absolute scorcher of a lap in his first go around here in Bathurst. Down through to the chase we go. The 119 looking very, very strong indeed. In towards Murray's. So far, so good for the 119. Still reeling away from a hat-trick of victories in Barcelona. Down to the line then goes Christian LeBay, the first of our times onto the charts at 2 minutes dead, 0.655. Nearest to the line, Zalan Such currently ranks in 1.2 seconds off the beat there. Nearest to the line, number 17, Brooklyn Donkin of Euro Titans Endurance. Second fastest in the session. Number 35 to the line from behind. That's for Didier Potvin. And as it would appear, sadly, no time set. We see nearest to the line among several drivers, the number 30, and in front of him there, the number 32, Aidan Christie. If I'm not mistaken, this is Christie's home race. We saw not long ago then over on the GT4 Pro-Am Cup's visit to the circuit, Paul Ricard was a win on debut in category for Aidan Christie. You see now joining the masses, no pun intended there, Cedric Grenier-Mas, having celebrated his first victory of the season there. Currently fastest among the AM drivers as he's squeezed down to 8th by Ben Cheeseman and Aidan Christie. You also see for Kyle Jenkins joining the fray there in the top 5. David Tanguay currently 3rd. You see he gets out past there Aidan Christie in the 32 Mustang. Danny Felix, also a winner from last week's triple header in Barcelona, now fastest, the number 985, up and ahead of the number 6. Number 505 nearest. Here comes Badensky. Across the line, 3rd fastest there, and as it would happen, only about just under 4 tenths away from Cedric Grenier-Mas. Number 91 nearest, here comes Sanchez. 3rd in the championship in the AM division. Oh, a bit of a wobble there down at the chase for the 91. Nothing too severe though, as we've already seen really the blunt end of what can and often will happen here in Bathurst. Down through to turn 23. Sanchez to the line then, currently 3 times in AM. Let's see where he ranks among them. Currently 3rd across the line there, up and ahead of Badensky, tucked in behind Cedric Grenier-Mas, and as it would happen there, by less than a tenth of a second, 900ths as it would happen. 119 across the line a moment ago, 2 minutes 0.440. Zalan Such, 2 minutes 0.140, I should say. 3 tenths to the mark there ahead of LeBay, now down to 2nd. Number 17 across the line. Donkin stays 3rd. Tanguay not far from the line. We also see now onto the charts just a moment ago the 35. And that was Didier Potvin to Division 4th in the AMS. With Tanguay to the line. Needs about half a second there to have got up on Donkin in 3rd. Couldn't find it in that last lap just gone. Aidan Christie now 7th. You also see as well for the introduction there of Richard Cecil to the mix. Now starting another flying lap. The 616 slows down to allow him on past. That's Andrew Veldkamp that's led him on through on the mountain straight. Number 113 across the line, Kyle Jenkins. Right along with him there was that of Cedric Grenier-Mas. Fastest among the AMs at the moment, the number 6. Sergio Belda goes fastest for the AMs now, though. Getting up and ahead of Aidan Christie for 7th place overall in the session. Number 985, Danny Felix, now 7th and fastest of the AMs. Number 26 is nearby to the line. We see as well, here comes JM Keto. Up in front of him was Stefan Nikolai, who went 5th fastest in the pros and overall in today's session. 505 nearest. So here comes Matthew Badensky with LRM. BMW on its way down through to the line. Both he and Grenier-Mas now part of the same crew. And I believe is the Let's Race Mate team, if I'm to believe the acronym correctly. Number 800 nearest the line. Here comes Karina Stinson. As it would happen, though, for the V12 Vantage, no valid time set on that last go-around. 22 minutes left to go, so still plenty of time to chip away at these lap times. Here comes Ivan Sanchez. Holkianos Motorsports, number 91 across the line, stays in Division 4th and overall 12th place. Number 45 now nearest. Zalan Such dangerously close to breaking into the 159s, and he does it. 159.932 by the number 45 Lexus. Welcome back, Zalan Such. With LeBay now half a second out. We're seeing a seriously competitive performance so far by Zalan Such. Now holding half a second over the nearest car. There is only one car left on this grid, still within a second of him. We see, in the case of Brooklyn Donkeys, 1.178 seconds out, so just over that margin in third place. Number 616 approaching the line, Andrew Veldkamp with Malwar Racing AM Division. No time set on that last go around. Nearest, as we see there, a bit of a kerfuffle between the 55 and the 32. That was Stefan Nikolai and Aidan Christie. Kyle Jenkins leaps there from 6th to 3rd, displacing Donkin from the podium by 68 thousandths of a second. And we see they're spinning out from turn 1 at Hell Corner. His teammate Ben Cheeseman holds 7th for the time being. You see in the case of the number 96 here, Casey Malles, now having set a time in on the charts, ranked in Division 8th in the AM, 16th overall. We have Team Raceline Aston Martin. Number 26 across the line again, JM Quito. We saw continued struggles here for the Spaniard over the course of free practice. Now come qualifying, those issues haven't gone away anytime soon. And the Holkianos, number 26, still struggling for stability on the track today. 5:05 across the line. Badensky still in Division 7th in the AM category. Number 800 looking to put the first of their times in on the charts here. Here comes Karina Stinson with Aston Martin, goes 9th in the session, 17th overall. 91 nearest to the line here. Ivan Sanchez, 4th in class. Looking to catch up then to Grenier Massey, Felix and Belder. Couldn't find anything on that last go around. It is worth pointing out there, the gap between these two, up on 3rd and 4th of this grid, stands in at around, having a glance here, 62 thousandths of a second. Super, super close we're seeing there between those two. And that's a far cry of what we're seeing in anything regarding the pro field at the moment. Half a second between the leading duo, and then another half a second on top of that between 2nd and 3rd. It's only until you get to that 2nd row where you start to see any closer gaps. Brooklyn Donkin retakes 3rd from Kyle Jenkins. It's worth noting as well, these two separate by, having a glance in there, 27 thousandths of a second. Actually, as it would happen then, no, 37 thousandths of a second. Again, that's not to take much away from what is already an incredibly small gap between these two. And even smaller than that is 300ths of a second, the gap between David Tangwe and Wright in 5th and 6th place. Battle of the V8 juggernauts then from Bentley and Lexus on that 3rd row. And the 4th row behind, Stefan Nikolai up and ahead of Ben Cheeseman, and Aidan Christie ranks in 9th. But there does appear to be a few connection spats there for the number 32. That's worth keeping an eye on and monitoring over the next 18 minutes of the session. Nearest to the line, then we'll go and catch on here with the number 26. JM Quito looks to finally put in a valid lap time here with Holkianos Motorsports. Across the line he goes, and goes up and ahead of Casey Malles and Karina Stinson with Aston Martin up to what is now currently a Division 9th. From behind went the number 113. That was for Kyle Jenkins in his continued pursuits to take back 3rd place from Brooklyn Donkin. Of course, 5-Star and Euro Titans have somewhat of a camaraderie in the last couple of months. The two teams having raced closely alongside one another in multiple championships. There is, of course, that rivalry on track. As far as we've been able to see, though, there's quite a fair deal of respect from both sides to one another. That's not stopping them or barring them from having a very good race at hand. So if these two can still hold what is an ultra close 2nd row from one another, I do look forward thoroughly to seeing what they can do when we go green and racing here in Bathurst. We're 17 minutes out, though, from that grid form up for round 8 of the championship. 2 hours of racing to follow thereafter, 2 mandatory pit stops and a pit window of 90 minutes. Up through Solman and McPhillamy, past the wall of death there for Kyle Jenkins. And it's worth noting for the mid-engine cars like the Ferrari, that stability concern that they've held on to for quite a fair deal of time is still going to rear its ugly head here on this track, especially when we mount the crest out through McPhillamy and in towards the downhill section. You can see so far Jenkins tackling it head on. Meanwhile, in terms of updates from the front, Lebey and Such still 508 thousandths. I mean, that time by Zalan Such was phenomenal. I am not even sure myself how he's been able to do that, where the majority of the times, taking a look back into those qualifying predictions as we follow on here with the number 45 down through to Forest Elbow, just having a glance back at those qualifying predictions showed nothing even close to the ballpark of a 1:59. As a matter of fact, LeBay's time, a 2 minutes 0.420, that's quite on the money to what we're seeing at the moment. As a matter of fact, having a look at those times from LeBay, it's a 2 minutes 0.440 we're seeing from him at the moment. So he's only 200ths off of his calculated best. And as we mentioned before, that data erroneously left out that of Zaran Such. I suppose now that was to their mistake, because he's half a second up over the best calculated times. We couldn't have fathomed in today's race we'd be seeing a 1:59 from the data we had in front of us. Down across the line he goes, still holding that fastest time, 1:59.932 from the number 45 Lexus. Down through to turn 1. In front of him, Aiden Christie, also making their way up the mountain straight, the number 26 of JM Keto. 1:13 out on track at the moment, 1:19 across the line. Still can't land a mark any closer to that leading time. We see from behind him was Stefan Nikolai. 900ths as it would happen. Actually, you know, having a glance in here, 110 thousandths away from right in 6th place. So still very close from the 4th and 3rd rows. But they've got closer struggles inside of the 3rd row than there would be to anything outside of it. You see for Brooklyn Donkin, needs half a second and then some to go up towards 2nd place. It's a far cry at the moment for the BMW, as strong a machine as it is and as capable a driver as Donkin is. This ceiling set in by the 2 leaders at the moment of Such and LeBay is one very, very difficult not only to reach but to break, even if we can find a driver close enough to fight them. It's going to lie on the race here, really, to see what will decide their fate over the first couple of laps. Bathurst is a brutal circuit when it comes to race starts. We've seen some of the most vicious starts to any race play out here at Bathurst. For the keen-eyed viewers in chat, you'll remember back to the NLRL Sunday League Round 4's doubleheader in Bathurst that gave us what I would say is by and large one of the largest wipeouts we've ever seen on film here on TRTN at race 1 of 2, a monolithic wipeout out of turn 1. That's something that this grid here on the World Series will be adamant to not replicate. The fear of history repeating itself lingers over this grid. And that's something that will definitely weigh heavy on them for the run in towards not even just turn 1, but turn 2, 3, 4. Hell, as a matter of fact, all 23 corners of the track are capable targets to create an incident of that scale. That is just simply how dangerous Bathurst can be. And that's what makes this such a beloved circuit, because it's one that is not only admired but respected. Even the most astute of drivers can come undone on a track like this. It's what gives tracks like this and other tracks like, for example, the Nürburgring Nordschleife, the mystique they govern in endurance car and sports car racing. As these tracks stretch beyond just a ribbon of tarmac, this is, and what it represents is this Herculean challenge for these drivers. Something they're not going to face on other tracks, because this isn't like other tracks. This is the mountain. This is Mount Panorama. We see down to the line then, Brooklyn Donkin. Can he find a mark then closer? Yes, he can, actually. As it would stand there, is now within half a second of Christian LeBay. It's about 5, actually looking here, having a glance in. Yes, he is very much so within. Just about there. I want to say that's about 400 and... I want to say here about 400 and... yeah, I'm not good with maths here. 497 thousandths roughly between those two at the moment. Super close though, I would say, when you consider that now we have 4 drivers as a matter of fact, very close to one another in terms of those times. Donkin certainly has the pace, but Jenkins has even more, becoming the 3rd driver to be within a second of that fastest time. Well, technically the 2nd, but 3rd encompassing. 755 thousandths away from Zaran Such's fastest. It puts him now just under a quarter of a second from LeBay, and we see somehow In spite of all of that, in spite of what the ceiling may appear to have been for the 45, he extends the margin to a 1:59.745. I do not think now we are in the presence of standard competition here in Mount Panorama. There have been many drivers to come through and challenge this circuit head-on, but very few have been able to do what Zalan Such has been able to do today, and that's stand up the rest of the grid. This is going to make for a very exciting start here. We know, pound for pound, Zalan Such has the pace here. There's no denying that part. Mount Panorama isn't a track of pure pace. It's a track of consistency, much the same as the Nürburgring. Being fast is one thing, but surviving is another. You can't see the checkered flag when you've rolled the car 7 times down the hill. Unless you've got a very strong car, which I highly doubt from this grid. 11 minutes left to go. We'll leave you on board with Kyle Jenkins and return to you in just a moment's time. So going to catch on board with the Ferrari, making his way onto the Conrod Straight. Following on board, if we can, with the number 113 on with Jenkins. Following there, just catching right in the trailing end of his flying lap, was up 6/10 as he crossed the line to make 6th to 4th on the grid now, making sizable leaps up to that second row. Lexus, as they have seen over that front row, looking equally strong on the second row, courtesy of the number 54. We'll be seeing Wright much more often next week when we head in to the last round. That'll be taking us, if I'm not mistaken, back here to Bathurst of the RC UK Shooting Stars Cup. We, of course, covered the last 3 rounds. The most recent visit taking us over to East Kingsdown in Kent, the Brands Hatch circuit. Lexus looking fairly capable as it would stand in first and second row appearance for the 45 and 54. Meanwhile, taking a look at the rest of the order right now, we now find ourselves in the scope of some 4 drivers within the midst of the fastest time. It's worth noting there between Wright and Jenkins, a factor of only 0.005 of a second between the 113 and the 54. Out through McPhillamy, we follow here with the 54. It was already looking to be on a absolute scorcher of a lap. The one just gone, and following up swiftly from that, it's even more action here from the 54. The American talent bringing us careening down through the S's and in towards Forest's elbow at turn 18. Meanwhile, up at the front, the 45 stays in at the pits, now nearly 7 tenths clear. There are very few drivers, I think, that exist on record that could floor LeBay's times in this championship. Zalan Such is certainly one among them. But this is different, what we're seeing here today. This is unparalleled performance from Zalan Such. Making our way then down through to the chase we see here from the 54 Wright. 5 thousandths away from Jenkins, who we're told now is out through turn 2 into the cuttings at turns 3 and 4. Back out on track with just under 8 minutes left to go in this qualifying session. Down through to turn 23 at Murray's. We'll see here for Wright. From 4th, needs 5 thousandths for 3rd. Across the line he goes, and sadly couldn't find anything in that last lap just gone. So with just about 7 minutes left to go coming up on, he's still got plenty of time to refresh and resolve and get back out there and set more times in. Those tyres go through very, very quickly in these qualifying sessions on a track as demanding as Mount Panorama. I'm sure the drivers are quite relieved to find that conditions are much more in their favour, considering this track can be certainly a lot hotter than it normally is. 7 minutes left to go. Out in front of him there, we just see making his way up the track, the 35, Didier Potvin with Malwar Racing's AM division. Speaking of the AMs as well, taking a look at the current running order for them in qualifying here. Sergio Belde ranks in at pole position with Danny Felix in second and Andrew Veldkamp in third, Richard Cecil in fourth, and JM Quito now marks the top 5. So it was a bit of a slow burner here for the 26. He had those problems over the course of the free practice session. He had even more problems towards the start of qualifying where he failed to rank in on the charts for so long. But you get the momentum building on the 26, and that's one of the defining qualities of the Holkianos drivers is once they can get the ball rolling, it's very difficult to get them to stop. They will continue to pick up steam. And in the case here of Quito, he's still amongst that top 5. He's got a competitive start lining up in front of him here in the AM division. He can certainly use that to his benefit, especially when you realize sandwiched in between 2 Fords at the moment is Richard Cecil, a driver who is going to struggle in these back straights, especially here on the Conrod. 1.9 kilometers between ourselves at turn 18 and then down at turns 19 and 20. But technically turn 19 into turn 20 as you just exit the second part of Forest Elbow. In that section of the Fords and Lexuses of this grid will reign supreme among the rest of the ranks here. One driver I am concerned about in terms of vehicle choice has been one that has mainstayed with Lamborghini for the longest time. Ben Cheeseman is a driver who understands that Huracan very well. I've not seen a driver stay longer with a brand like Lamborghini than Cheeseman. We've seen plenty of drivers come and go with the Lamborghini Huracan. Very few have stayed as long as that 114, but even he appears to be struggling here at Bathurst as the major design flaws of the Huracan start to rear their ugly head. It's a lot sharper in response to the Ferrari, but with that comes a significant loss of stability and predictability. It makes this car very sharp around the edges, very difficult to work with, but to the right kind of driver, that's exactly what they want. In the case of Cheeseman, he wants that sharp turn and he wants more response out of the car, but he's going to have to face the facts here. That car on the majority of this circuit is going to try and kill him very violently. And such is the case of the Huracan overall. It's a very competitive car. Give it the right circumstances and it will fly. But this is going to be a tough one for him today. Bathurst is a car killer on all fronts. It doesn't discriminate. The Lamborghini will find significant challenge. And so too will that of the Porsche. We've seen quite a fair few Porsches come through and do well in these races. If I'm not mistaken, last time we saw a Porsche win here was at the 4 Hours of Bathurst over on the NLRL Console Endurance Series. That was for, I believe, Fabio Farr and Tyler Vermack, the duo setter exclusive esports that won in that Bathurst outing. They were the last to do it with Porsche, but this is going to be a curious one for Richard Cecil. He ranks in third on that grid in the AMs, only a single hundredth away from Danny Felix, who took his first race win home last weekend. This is going to be very entertaining to see. Zalan Such now only 467 thousandths from LeBay. It's worth pointing out LeBay is starting to pick up steam here in that 119. But he still finds himself astray of that 159 mark, and that's really the ceiling he's going to have to shatter to get himself into the conversations of leading here in Bathurst. He's either going to need an absolutely lightning start off of Zalan Such, or he's going to have to pray he's got better consistency. And a driver with his kind of experience, that's something you can more than definitely bet on. But given how well Zalan Such has performed in his limited appearances to this championship, I would say this is a very big coin toss we're seeing now between the 45 and the 119 over who leads after lap 1. As a matter of fact, with 3 minutes left to go then in this session, we'll go into we continue to watch here with LeBay. He's 467 thousandths out. Down to the line he goes. Can he bring the gap in closer? Not this go around, but he still has one more shot. If not two, if he can really get the hammer down here, he might very well have 2 more laps available to him at the end of this qualifying session. If you're tuning in on the Twitch chat at the moment, you'll see that a poll has just opened up. You can now vote in and see who you think will lead after lap 1, or lead into lap 1, I should say, of this race. This is going to be a very curious scope of things. I'd say we've already seen quite a fair vote of confidence there for LeBay and for Such. Now it's 67% in the lead. You see, out of the current top 5, that could still shift here with drivers like Tanguay not too far off the back end of that top 5. You see here for the Bentley, out through turn 23, across the line he goes. As it would happen, he needs to find just about a tenth of a second here to get himself in contention to the top 5. You see of the remaining drivers of this grid was Alan Such residing to the pit lane, content with the performance he's had. And sits upon his throne here, the 1:59.745. I mean, what a time that's been from the 45 there. Absolutely rapid there. Greased lightning from that 45. See down through to the chase here. Here's Christian LeBay. 467 thousandths is what the margin still remains as. And we said before, if we can really get the hammer down here in this third sector, he might just be able to cross the line with enough time for one more go around. We'll see, though, down to turn 23, if that is the case for the 119. Looking to catch in with him here just down towards the line if we can catch him in time. He is moving very, very quickly to the line there. And across the line he goes to a 2 minutes 0.375 in that last lap just gone. And residing to the pit lane then, LeBay, having done all that he could here to try and fight with Zalan Such, comes up empty-handed in talks of pole position. Brooklyn Donkin still out on track, but this will be his last go-around in the number 17 BMW. It's been a very capable performance by him to go toe-to-toe with Jenkins and Wright for contention of the last of those podium positions as Wright peeled out to the pit lane. Jenkins still out on track at the moment, albeit now 140 thousandths away from Donkin. Let's see if he can bring the gap any closer to the front row. To the line comes the 17 and stays there at third place, 802 thousandths from pole. But a very capable time there from Brooklyn Donkin. This is ought to make a very interesting race start. We'll catch on with the 113. Actually, I think we'll stay on board with him as there has been some trouble here for David Tanguay. Has now brought himself to the pit lane at the end of this qualifying session. We'll see for Kyle Jenkins what is the calling card here on the run in towards turn 23. He's coming to the pit lane at the end of qualifying. The number 114, will he be following him in? We can see he's already pitching over to the left-hand side. And yes, into the pit lane goes Ben Cheeseman at the end of this session. That brings about the end of quali, as it would happen here in round 8 of the Competizione Performance League World Series powered by Malwa Transport. See, though, there is one more driver to speak of here. Cedric Grenier-Massey, a driver who took a race win for the first time in this series last week in our triple header in Barcelona. It was a very action-packed fling down in the AM category. Taking a look back into those previous race wins, we saw ahead of what was a triple header of wins for Christian LeBay, bringing him up to 5 wins this season after Barcelona last weekend. It was Fisher, Felix, and Grenier-Massey to take a win each in all 3 outings in Barcelona. That brings the current number of unique race winners in the AM category from what was before that round only 3 drivers up to now 6. It doubled in the span of just one weekend. Previous winners being from Cecil, Belder, and Dos Santos. To the line then, Grenier-Massey finishes off this session in Division 7th in the AM category. It's going to be a bit of a crawl for him in this race coming up, but of course we've seen how chaotic the starts can be here at Bathurst, and that can open up plenty of doors for these drivers over the course of the session at large. Now, before we do get into the talks of any news and the grid itself, a reminder of the regulations at play. We've come out of 30 minutes of qualifying. Up and around the corner is 120 minutes of racing. That's 2 hours with 2 mandatory pit stops in all, both of which for fuel stops, and a pit window at 90 minutes, meaning that will open after the first 15 minutes of racing and will close 15 minutes before the race ends. So taking a look back into the grid here and picking up on the topic of news then, and starting things off in the world of the NLRL Sunday League. The sign-ups for Season 6 of the NLRL Sunday League open up tomorrow. So that opens up tomorrow, Sunday, 10th of May, 2026. You can get your sign-ups in just a week before the start of the first round of Season 6. And in the British Touring Car Championship, Ash Sutton wins the Brands Hatch race to pole, just gone past today between our two broadcasts from HCCL and now today here with Competizione Performance League. That's going to be exciting for the new sort of Ford sedan version of the Focus that's been introduced for 2026. Had some great resolve in the opening 3 races at Donington Park. Now heading into rounds 4, 5 and 6 of the British Touring Car Championship. Ash Sutton will start on pole for round 4. We'll have more results then when we get into our next broadcast next Monday over on Fatch GTs. Of course, tomorrow will be no broadcasts from the Sunday League as we're still a week away from the start. So then we wait for the grid to form up, and what a qualifying session we've had there. Zalan Such above and beyond for pole position. We now see the grid form up with the 45 leading that charge. Alongside him, Christian LeBay in second place with Brooklyn Donkin in third. Wright in 4th and Kyle Jenkins in 5th. Tanguay in 6th, Nikolai in 7th, Cheeseman in 8th, and Aiden Christie rounds out the top 9 of the pro grid. Then into the AM category, pole position for Sergio Belda and Holkianos Motorsports. Danny Felix in division 2nd with Richard Cecil in 3rd, Andrew Veldkamp in 4th, JM Quito in 5th, and Didier Potvin in 6th. Cedric Grenier-Massey in 7th, and Ivan Sanchez in 8th, Matthew Badensky in 9th. And Casey Miles rounds out the division top 10. Karina Stinson in 11th and Stephen Black in 12th. Rounding out a 21-car grid. 2 categories in contention then. 11 on one side, 10 on the other for the start of round 8. With about 2 minutes left to go. Discussing then those overtaking opportunities. Now, major overtaking opportunities as far as we're concerned start at turn 2. And also, just quickly to have a glance in at the end of the poll we launched just in the trailing end of qualifying over who leads after lap 1. Zalan Such being the most favourable option there. 60% of the votes over towards Such, with the remaining 40% over in favour of LeBay. That's still plenty close enough to keep this one up in the air. The majority of fans viewing it at home have pretty high hopes here on the 45, and with performance like his, that's not a big surprise at all, given just how quick he was in qualifying. But qualifying's one thing. Can he do that over the course of the race? That's the real question. Well, we've seen already for Zalan Such the scope here of 4 wins over the course of this championship at large, 3 of which in Silverstone, and then 1 of which upon return not too long ago then at the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. Let's see if he can do it again. Coming up then in about 20 seconds, the 30-second warning for the grid. The drivers will fire their engines up, all 21 engines firing in unison. For the start of this race, the ground will rumble with engines here in Bathurst. So we'll go on board to Zalan Such to see. The 30-second warning has been declared there. Now the engines will fire up. You see here for Zalan Such, we'll follow on board with him for the start of the formation lap. 5.4 litre naturally aspirated Lexus V8 engine firing up there. What a sound that is. Rattles the air around it. If you've ever been around these older GT3 cars, they don't do away with any formalities on sound and keeping things nice and relatively quiet like we have with newer gen GT3s. These things are absolute ground shakers. Having the pleasure of visited Silverstone not too long ago when they were showing off some of the older GT3s. You can hear firsthand from that pit lane, having been in the pit lane myself and seeing these older GT3s kicking up about, like the Lexus, like the Aston Martin V12 Vantage, and even like the older GT3s like the M3 GTR of what was technically GT2B at the time, or later became LMGTE. They are insanely loud. One driver noted there to start from the pit lane. Cedric Grenier-Massey in the number 6 starts from the paddock here for 2 hours of racing in Bathurst. Back on the subject then of overtaking zones, and we find it here at turn 2 to be our most bountiful opportunity in sector 1. Now, out past turn 2 does give the drivers a bit of a conundrum. If there's a good exit to be found here, they can more than definitely set themselves up for a leap to the inside at turns 3 and 4 at the cuttings. This double apex, almost, I'd say it's more of a left, if we go rally terminology here, because it's the best way I can describe it, sort of a left 3 tightens into square left uphill. I mean, that's almost to a hairpin, I would say that is. But it's very, very tight in that section. And if you can anchor the car at the inside, it is very, very easy to hold those positions. But conversely, if you have anyone give you a bit of pushback, it's very quick to devolve into contact in that section. So they do find themselves faced with a bit of a conundrum here through this section as we make our way up over the crest of the hill, in through Reed, and then into Solman and McPhillamy out past the wall of death. It is a follow-through section here. Very difficult to stay side by side. If there is a drastic difference in pace, it's not impossible to go 2 abreast into McPhillamy, but it is very dangerous. The drivers will be definitely looking to push the envelope out on what they can and can't get away with on this track. Heading down through Skyline, much the same story. Again, this is one of the major, I'd say not necessarily complaints, but it's been one of the major observations of this track. It's very difficult to get overtakes in purely because this section requires so much focus that trying to throw another driver in the mix will almost immediately lead to an accident. Down through the dipper into the S's. Now, in towards Forest's Elbow is another area where you can definitely see some overtakes planted in. Now, it's sketchy, much like in the case of the cuttings, because as we've already seen, you come up over a crest into this braking zone. It's very easy, as we've already seen there from Stefan Nikolai and JM Keto earlier in this stream. It's very easy for the back end to step up and away from you and clatter the wall at some serious speed here. So they'll have to approach that one with due caution. This is where the opportunities start to open up plenty more. The back straight here at the Conrod, 1.9 kilometers of FIA Grade 2 tarmac brings us up towards turns 20 through 22. And this section will be rife with overtaking chances. Slipstream Racing is going to be at the forefront of these drivers' concerns. You can see 3 of the fastest cars of the current GT3 lineup mark in on that podium. Lexus, Ford, and BMW. 3 juggernauts of straight line speed. This is going to be a very fast top 4, as it would happen there with Wright also driving for Lexus. It's going to be tough for the Ferraris to stay with, and same story for Lamborghini and for Porsche. As we head down into the chase, this is where overtaking opportunities pick back up. If you can't get the slipstream sorted, you can certainly plant yourself alongside, coming out from turn 20 into the heavy braking zone that presides over turn 21. We'll come to see in due course how many of these overtaking opportunities we'll see in this race, as we're about to face down against the mountain here. Mount Panorama makes round 8 of the Competizione Performance League World Series as we make our way down towards the line here. Turn 23, and it's a very short run to the race start. Home of the Maguires 12 Hours of Bathurst, home of the Bathurst 1000. Mount Panorama then, the home of today's round of the Competizione Performance League World Series, powered by Malwar Transport and live exclusively on TRTN. 21 cars in all, 1 from the pit lane, 10 on either side, and we are green and racing here in Australia. A great start from the front row, as to be expected, in towards turn 1, an even better start anticipated there from the second row. Brooklyn Donkin looking to put himself side by side with Christian LeBay, but nothing as of yet. A clean start then through Held Corner, and that is certainly a breath of fresh air after our last couple of experiences here in Bathurst. Such breaks away then. LeBay in second, Donkin and Wright side by side. Donkin to the inside to hold off third. Tanguay marks the back of the top 5 as we go barreling up through to turn 2 for the first time. A great start then from our top 5 up through turn 2. Now we see Tanguay side by side with Wright, as Wright could fall into the back of the top 5 at the time we hit the cuttings. We see here from Wright, he's now in behind Tanguay, and behind him was some trouble there with a clock against the wall for that of Kyle Jenkins. Bear in mind, it can quickly devolve into madness here in Bathurst. Make no mistake of it. It will be very, very sudden, and it may very well be a chance we don't capture how it starts, but we could very well see how it ends. We see for most drivers, they're making their way up through Solman and McPhillamy for the first time. We see for LeBay in hot pursuit to the race lead. So far, so good then here in Bathurst. Looking in from the AM drivers, Belder continues to lead here over Cecil, who now advances to second. Danny Felix in third, with JM Keto in fourth. And we do have, yes, a yellow flag, and it is for having a glance in here. The number 35, yes, Didier Potvin in trouble, but we can't yet see his location, but it's been down at the Dipper and the S's here just after Brock Skyline. Judging off the sounds here, I don't particularly believe that 35 is mobile. Let's go and see if we can catch him here. Looking to find the number 35. You can see now with Didier Potvin, mild damage. I think he was just stranded at the time. Zalan Such still leads over Labay, but we see for Labay looking for the inside at Murray's right off the bat here, leading out of lap 1. Most speculations had it at Zalan Such to lead after lap 1, but it could very well shift on the run into Hell Corner onto lap 2. Labay still gunning for the inside, elbows out for the run to Hell Corner. Such gives him the room off the exit of turn 1. But falling back in behind, now taking a look behind to see the Donkin has still held off 3rd place. David Tanguay now to 4th, Wright in 5th, Jenkins 6th, Nikolai in 7th, Christie in 8th, and Cheeseman in 9th. Then leading in the AMS at the moment, Sergio Belda ahead of Cecil, Felix, Quito, Veldkamp, Sanchez, Badensky, Stinson, Miles, Black, Grenier Masse, and Potvin. A very exuberant start then here in Bathurst. One that is a proper breath of fresh air, considering the amount of dread this circuit has carried into its race start. To see one so close to the margin there is quite a refresher. Up and around then Quarry Corner in towards Frog Hollow and Reed Park. Now through to Solman and McPhillamy Park. So we see here from LeBay being intercepted, as it would appear, by Brooklyn Donkin. BMW on flying form through Sector 2, as it would happen, getting even closer to the 119, while Zalan Such continues to break a line away. Taking a look at some nearby fights as well, plenty among them down in the AM category, but one closest to the front of the field right now presides over Richard Cecil versus Sergio Belda versus Danny Felix, as it would happen. All three of the podium sitters still close to one another. Also worth noting here, that possibility for a fight fairly soon here between Kyle Jenkins and Stefan Nikolai. 113 versus 55. The Mercedes is no slouch, of course, especially put up against the Ferrari. We have seen, though, it's been a bit of a difficult car in the past. Some love it, some hate it. It's a very divisive machine on this grid. Personally, my standpoint is it's a bit of an odd car to try and tune up, but Mercedes knew what they were doing when they were designing it. And they have a very strict code of what is acceptable on that machine. It takes a certain caliber of driver to get behind the wheel of the Mercedes. It takes another caliber entirely to master it. Taking a look then towards the front of the field to see, there's your physical gap at the moment. Only a few car lengths, if that, between Zalan Such and Christian LeBay. At the forefront of racing here, the first 5 minutes of round 8 of the World Series underway proper. We see the emergence of a newly found fight for 3rd place. Brooklyn Donkin might have to get defensive here because David Tanguay is gaining on him. You see, though, down through turn 2, he's lost a lot of steam. That's picked up right into the hands here of Wright. Let's go to catch on board with him in the number 54. Seeing here with Wright up through the cuttings in towards Quarry. In his pursuit of 4th place. Behind him, Kyle Jenkins and Stefan Nikolai. They're getting closer to a chance of a fight for 6th in the near future. Up and around Solman into the wall there. Big clatter against the wall for that of Kyle Jenkins. That Ferrari can only take so much of a beating here before it starts throwing punches back. And this is going to be a very sketchy state of affairs. We're watching over the rear bumper of Wright. As you can see, stepping into the wall there. There goes Kyle Jenkins to the wall. And that's going to be the yellow flags out down at the Dipper. Not a great turn of events there at all for Kyle Jenkins. It does appear, though, that he has got back up. And as far as we know, there is back up and running. So we are back into green flag conditions. Stefan Nikolai now rises to 6th place. Wright still in pursuit here, but he's losing ground by the bucketful on the straightaways here to keep up with the Bentley of David Tanguay. LeBay Such 1.5 seconds. That's almost the same gap he holds there over Brooklyn Donkin. So a bit of an armistice found on the podium between Lexus, Ford, and BMW. We see here for Sergio Belda, currently leading in the AMS, up over Richard Cecil. You see that Porsche still very close behind. I think we may have been a little too quick to write it off in terms of its shortcomings on the straights, it seems everywhere else, that Porsche is clinging to the back end of Sergio Belda's number 65 Mustang. It certainly made things quite a fair deal more interesting than we would have thought in the AM category. Albeit it has come at the cost of wider fighting across the AMs inside of that top 5. The top 2 distinctly separate from the rest of the field. We do have another yellow flag. It's for Cedric Grenier-Massey. Down at the chase as it would happen. We also see collected as part of it there was, I believe, or just getting out fast now, is Didier Potvin. Back in the green flag conditions. In the pits is Kyle Jenkins. After his wipeout down at the S's and the Dipper. A very rough start then for that Ferrari. And it was always going to catch someone. Bathurst does not let go of the chance to take someone out of the race. It's a pity then in that sense. It had to be the 113 on this occasion. We see for his teammate, the 114. Ben Cheeseman, a driver we watch with great caution. You see up in front there, that's been trouble for Stefan Nicolai. Now dropping in behind Aiden Christie. And now directly into the iron sights here of the Lamborghini of Ben Cheeseman, now contesting 7th in towards Forest's elbow. You can see the Mercedes far too wounded to fight him back. A nice and easy 7th for Ben Cheeseman, much to the chagrin of Stefan Nicolai. Our now second casualty, or second major casualty on this field, as it's very likely to be the case if we go to catch on board with the Merc at this time. As you can see, his performance flagging by the second there, that he is more than definitely coming into the pits on this lap. I do not see him staying out onto lap 4. You can see that steering system compromised as well, and he's likely to be taking a visit to the grass as we see super close to taking a fair deal of that runoff. You can see right now he's having to pitch the car in. Very, very sudden stop into the pits. He doesn't really have much control over steering the car over to the left. Now into the pits he goes. Our next major casualty then, Stefan Nicolai. You see for Kyle Jenkins, he's back out onto the field, but as we already seen there, a bit of a bump at Quarry. He already bumps the wall of death once before. Now adamant to avoid it. Making his way through to McPhillamy, down through Skyline. Taking things nice and steady now, knowing that the Ferrari has been very quick to bite back in this section of the track. Watching back in, Alan Such leads over LeBabe now by 2.3 seconds as we round to McPhillamy Park. On the run to Skyline. 2.5 seconds presiding over the 45 and the 119. Taking a look at the wider standings then after 10 minutes of racing. Already having gotten under here in the land down under here in Bathurst. Dalan Such leads over LeBay with Donkin in 3rd, Tanguay 4th, right 5th, Christie in 6th, and Cheeseman in 7th. Leading the AMs at the moment by only half a second as we now see trouble there for Richard Cecil taking the runoff at Skyline, clatters the wall. And that's a big hit for him there. I would not be too surprised if that's done damage for him. We also see trouble for Danny Felix. I believe bumps the wall down at the Dipper, but has done far less damage than what has happened here for the number 5 as we see down through Forest's elbow. Much the same as what's happened for Stefan Nicolai. Richard Cecil from 2nd in the AMs drops now to the back of the podium and will be once again an early visitor to the pit lane. Veldkamp catching him at a fast rate of knots here on the Conrod. Up towards the chase. Making our way then down through to turn 20. You can see the Richard Cecil just stepping off to the side, trying to stay as far out of the way of any other driver right now, given the current state of his Porsche. Borderline inoperable there. Much the case as we also saw for the Mercedes. Now, we saw this a little bit back in Barcelona, but we now get to see the battle of the Astons once again here. Karina Stinson versus Casey Malles. 2 generations of Vantage going toe-to-toe here. The V12 Vantage introduced in 2013 versus the V8 Vantage introduced in 2018. Now, the V12 was phased out quite a fair deal before the platform was. It did become the V8 Vantage after a certain amount of time. I believe that was what continued its efforts over in GTE. What was technically known at the time as the Vantage GT2. Later went on to feature the Jaguar AJ37, which is a derivative, if I'm not mistaken, of the AJ50, which was, fun fact, the same engine that you would find not only in the Range Rover SVR, but also in the Emil Frey Jaguar XKG3, which we saw here on Competizione Performance League as part of the Jaguar GT3 Revival Series. And if you're watching on the TRTN YouTube channel, you can go and find the playlist and watch through the Jaguar GT3 Revival Series, a very fascinating little series indeed. Had some very action-packed racing, especially in the British chapter when the double stints were introduced for the majority of that second half. Now, watching here with Stinson has revealed one thing right now, and that's that she is catching up remarkably fast here to the 505 of Matthew Badensky of Let's Race Mate in the number 505 Beamer. The 800 has a chance here, and it seems that in spite of all of the difficulties she's faced with this older platform, one that has been a bit of a confusing pick for what seems to be a relatively new driver to the field, Stinson finally playing the gamble right here, because Bathurst has really given that V12 an opportunity to sing here on these straights and glide through these corners in ways the others are for some reason now struggling to do. For a track as old-fashioned as Bathurst, a design that has kicked around for quite a fair few years here, it's worth noting that the layout of this track in greater part has existed since about 1938. So this is a very old layout. It was updated upon after 1986 to introduce a few other iterations into the track's design, but the skeleton structure of Mount Panorama has been around since its inception in 1938 and is still starkly close to that. For an old-fashioned track, an old-fashioned car was definitely required. She finds herself right now, after the casualties suffered in the AM category, up in front of her, right now staring down the sights of a possible top 6 in the AM division, with Mal's still on her tail. Right now, action has simmered down amongst the masses of the pros, with now only 7 of them at the front of the field, 2 stranded way out past, courtesy of Jenkins and Nikolai. Now, it's worth pointing out they came to the pits, but you'll note that that counter next to them did not go down. Well, that's for the reason that we're still about a minute and a half from the pit lane officially opening. So yes, they were able to come in and get those repairs, but it was never going to count towards anything. You see recent troubles then force Badensky down past both Astons as he drops now to 15th overall in the race. That currently stands in about 8th position in the AMs. Didier Potvin also coming in, heavy front end damage. We of course saw it on the map down at Skyline. We didn't yet catch him in the trailing end of it, but this has been continued troubles here for Potvin and for many drivers already caught amongst the casualties of today's race. Kyle Jenkins, Richard Cecil and Stefan Nikolai among them. And this is going to be a sort of a race back to the top for them. We see here for Stefan Nikolai sliding his way through the cutting at turns 3 and 4. About 40 seconds then away from the opening of the pit lane. We see just scraping past the BP Ultimate signs there in Quarry Corner. Sliding his way out though, yeah, the 55 nearly into the wall. He's done very well to hold the brakes shut and not find himself a victim of the wall once again, but those tires are gone. Watch this here. I mean, this was brilliant preservation. It's a mixture here of good skill to recover the car and luck. Of course, he has still spun, but I think it's a miracle the speed he was carrying in towards Solman that he did not find his way to either of the walls in one of the narrowest sections of the track. He's done remarkably well given the circumstances. That would have been in the course of about a few tenths of a second for him to react to that one. And now we see the pit window has now opened. We see for Potvin, he's still in. So this is a curious case because he's come into the pits and has stopped just as the window is open. So will it be a case that counts toward or not? We'll come to see in due course. As it would happen, no. The talks of fighting in the AM category, Stinson v Mals v Badensky, is still fresh in our mind as one of the closest fights going on at this time. 3 cars in contention, 2 Astons and a BMW. The way through to the cuttings, we see here but Casey Mals still chasing down Karina Stinson. We'll go to catch on board with that vantage. It's worth noting as well, Tanguay to right, a factor of 2.1 seconds. That could close down in the next couple of laps. You also see here Andrew Veldkamp and JM Keto separate by 2.4 seconds. Keto having recently been upgraded to 4th. Another Holkianos driver, Sergio Belda, leads that charge over Danny Felix by about 6 seconds. Looking in to find them with the Battle of the Astons. Catching in here with Karina Stinson. 5.9 litre V12 engine under the bonnet of that Vantage. As she slams the throttle down. Barely visible over that monstrously large rear wing. You'll see her start to carve a line away then from her fellow Aston Martin, Casey Miles of Team Raceline. Down through to the chase. We did just note there some trouble for the 707. Stephen Black, white flags for him down at Solman and McPhillamy. Watching here for Stinson, the valiant defence they're in of this current position on track, holding on. Oh, what just happened there? I think we had a driver just immediately retire. Curious as to know who that was. Was that the... I'm not sure. We just had a driver completely jump off the radar there. There was an incident down in the middle sector and now he's gone. Was that... I think it was the 55. Yes, I believe it could very well be the 55. We see Ben Cheeseman's now in the pit lane, serving an early pit stop. I think that was, yes, the 55 of Stefan Nikolai now out of this race. 20 cars remaining. Nearly 20 minutes into this race. A brutal, brutal turn of events for the 55. Sanchez now joins the top 5. Stinson fighting for 6th. Miles still in pursuit, though. So this is the fight going on at this time for 6th in the AM category. Miles versus Stinson. We see Miles trying to hook away to the inside, but has to force himself back in behind as it stands right now because it's going to get a lot narrower. Out through Reed into Solman. McPhillamy up and around the corner. We see in the background there, Miles clatters the wall. Just barely visible over the rear wing of Stinson's V12 Vantage. But Miles ran asunder down through Skyline and clattered the wall. There could be serious steering damages for the 96. That could be something to keep an eye on here. We'll check in with Casey Miles. He clatters the wall off the exit of turn 18. As it would appear, no serious steering damage, but he will be facing the blunt end of things now with damaged front aero. We see then Casey Miles dives to the pit lane to serve an early pit stop. Karina Stinson holds on to her advantage of 6th place in the AMS. Something worth noting about these older GT3s is some of the design on that aerodynamics. I mean, obviously, that huge, huge rear wing is the elephant in the room on that V12 Vantage. And I think if we take a look over to the Lexus, I wouldn't be too surprised if that's also a feature on the RCF. Let's go to find either of the RCFs here. We see... No, it's a top mount. So the V12 Vantage features a very old form then of the rear wing, the sort of top mount, so the bottom mount, I should say, sorry. The top mount being the more predominant one on the grid today. Following here with Christian Lebay, now 6.6 seconds from Zalan Such. That is brutal, the kind of gap that he's been able to force open over the course of this race. Looking to go and catch back in then with that Vantage, as it does give us an opportunity to take a look a little closer at the technology of GT3 gone by, because this is, again, the oldest design besides the Jaguar competing on this grid. I believe the Jaguar was a year before that in 2012. The 2013 car we see here then, the V12 Vantage, it features a more traditional bottom mount wing, so it mounts from underneath. You'll see with a lot more of rear wings of the day, of the current day, I should point out, have this top mounted design. And the reasoning behind that is because it ends up generating more downforce, only by about 500 newtons, but it's about 4% more having it mount over the top as it does having it mount from the bottom, like we see here on the V12 Vantage. So you can take a look between the two. So you see from underneath, bottom mount, about 12,000 newtons on a modern car, 12,500 when it's top mounted. And so, with action starting to simmer down on the grid after nearly 30 minutes of racing, the smoke clears on what has been already quite a fair few incidents here in Bathurst. Ben Cheeseman being one of the first drivers to have taken that early pit stop. We also see the case for Casey Malles and Stephen Black. 3 drivers then already having served their first pit stop. Now, for the greater majority of the field, they'll be gunning for things. Having a glance in here, in and around the, in about 18 minutes time roughly, when we've got about an hour and 20 left to go, and then when we've got about 40 minutes left to go, to try and break this 120-minute race into 3 stints of 40. That's the current going rate. Zalan Suchi's still got about 17 minutes of racing if he wants to adhere to that strategy as the leader of this race right now. Now in the pit lane as well goes JM Keto. Fully stopped in the pit lane then, JM Keto. No current telling how long he's going to be in there for. His teammate Sergio Belda leads in the AMs, up over Danny Felix. Andrew Veldkamp makes 3rd in the AM category. In the pros, it's Zalan Such, Christian LeBay and Brooklyn Donkin. Right now, though, action having slowed to a crawl here on this grid. As we mentioned before, such as a philosophy on this track that pace starts to become a secondary consideration. And most drivers, after a certain amount of time, when they start to form that distance, they just focus on survival. It's one thing to deviate from your best and optimum lap time by a few tenths to maybe a full second. It's another thing entirely to clatter the wall at over 100 miles an hour and end your race in milliseconds. As we've already seen, we've had a driver already drop from this race, the 55 Mercedes of Nikolai. And it's been brutal for him so far. Sergio Belda then leading by 8.3 seconds over Danny Felix. It's worth pointing out that in the case of Danny Felix, he did find himself a race winner last week in Barcelona. And it's not off the table to suggest that he could find himself a race winner today, but he's going to have to play his strategy very close to the chest if he wants to get within range of Sergio Belda, who's so far displayed great prowess in the AM category. Pole position for the Holkianos, number 65, and so far has actually found himself up a fair few positions overall on the grid, thanks to that better consistency. Hour and 35 minutes left to go then in this race, about 15 minutes out from our expected window of first mandatory pit stops. Cutting back on board to see here with Stinson. And a recent update to her fight could be, as it would happen, within range here to fight with Ivan Sanchez. 1.9 seconds up in front of her at the moment. A tremendous sound from the Aston Martin, I must say. We will have to catch on with her a little later on, as there is an update here to a recent yellow flag. It is for the number 35, Didier Potvin. Is now back into the paddock, and I could potentially see here, yes, he is back into the paddock. That could be the end of his race here today. Didier Potvin had trouble down at Forest's Elbow, turn 18 and 19 on track. We weren't able to catch how it happened, but now we see that he has been forced back into the pit lane. We're back in green flag conditions. This could be the end of the road and give us our second DNF of today. We'll wait for confirmation on that one. We see for Richard Cecil, it's going to be a long road to the top here. It has been a very troubled race for him. It all started down at Skyline. We see for him out through Solman into McPhillamy. It's a very sketchy section on that Porsche. Following here with Cecil as he attempts to intercept Casey Malles through the dipper. And similar to what we saw earlier in this broadcast day over on HCCL's multi-class championship, these rear engine cars, and we observed this with Alpine down in GT4, but we're seeing it somewhat of the same here with Porsche. These sort of compression zones like we have down at the Dipper, the Porsche actually gets a surprising amount of stability involved because of all of that weight shifting on its rear axle, giving the car quite a fair deal of grip. However, you do still have to be delicate with the throttle, especially on lower TC, as it can still cause the tyres to spin up sporadically, which can very quickly add up to a spin. Great move, though, out through the chase for Richard Cecil. He may be down positions, but he is not out of this race. Out of turn 23, up into 16th overall. See, joining us in chat then, Cal Ford of Milk Crate Racing. We saw earlier on today in Laguna Seca over on the HCCL Multi-Class Championship. Good evening to you. Joining us now as we're just coming up on the first 30 minutes underway here in the Bathurst 2-hour here in the Competizione Performance League World Series, powered by Malwa Transport, live exclusively on TRT. I'm watching here with David Tanguay as he now marks up third place on the grid. It's worth pointing out here, in the case of Brooklyn Donkin, he's come in for his first of 2 pit stops, so playing things a little under the belt, as it would happen, going earlier than that anticipated 1 hour 20 mark where the majority of drivers will be expected to come in. Right now, closest fights on track. Casey Miles versus Richard Cecil. JM Keto now into the pit lane. Recent news there for the 26. We also see Stinson v Sanchez. So this is certainly one to keep an eye on. We've been watching with Karina Stinson for some time in today's race. The Aston Martin having one of its best performances so far. Looking to catch on then. We spoke as well about its older aerodynamics. It was a talking point of ours during the sort of quiet points between action on track. And it's worth noting, just back in the case of this older rear aero setup, having a bottom mount wing, you make about 500 less newtons of downforce in a modern race car than you would if it were to be mounted over the top like we see with the Mustang. It's why there's been such a dramatic shift in how the rear wings look on these cars, to where they try and aim either for side mount, as we see in prototype racing, or where we see with an over-the-top kind of mount, where the rear wing hangs. I believe, having a quick glance through the data, the reasoning behind that is because it does allow the wing to flex just a little bit, giving it a better opportunity to provide downforce. Whereas with this, it's a lot more of a rigid structure. Double yellows out in front, but that's for the 35 still stranded in the pit lane. Didier Potvin. Still no news on if he's retiring from the race there. Was brought back into the paddock. I'd be surprised to see if that 35 is back out in the next 10 minutes. Of course, what was Aston Martin's remedy to the fact that compared to a top mount wing, they'd be making less power? Well, it's simple, just make the wing bigger. There was something of a fine arts to development back in the day of the early 2010s. I speak of it as if it's the 60s. I mean, we're hardly tinkering around with sketchbooks and pens and papers. You know, this is much more sophisticated than I think we give it credence for. We do see, hang on just a moment here, big trouble for the 96 and the 5. Richard Cecil in serious jeopardy. Looking to catch it. Oh, as he clatters past. That was the 616 of Andrew Veldkamp. Nearly collected Brooklyn Donkin. The number 5 is in a horrific spot. We see approaching there is Sanchez and Stinson. Oh, this is horrible. He's Austin Powers himself. Back into the pit lane goes Richard Cecil. And that is horrific news there. The number 119 is into the pit lane, and Cecil is sadly out. A bitter note for that race to end for him there. He had a great start to things, and it all came apart very early on. Bathurst giveth, and Bathurst taketh away. Meanwhile then, observing movement from the pit lane as LeBay is in the 119. Tanguay shoots up to second, right to third, and Aidan Christie to fourth. This early approach to the pits, then trying to undercut things by 8 minutes, was the same strategy we saw implemented by Brooklyn Donkin, who we now see is up to 7th overall in this race and will overtake LeBay. This will bounce back for him, though, in about 40-odd minutes' time here. Brooklyn Donkin playing for the early game, trying for a undercut strategy on the majority of the field. He's got up past LeBay, so that does put Donkin in consideration to the podium for this next stint of the race. Looking in for, again, one of the nearest fights on track as there is more trouble a-brewing. It's the 707 in trouble. Catching here Stephen Black off the exit of Griffin's Bend. We see the 17 and the 616 get up by him. Now we see the approach of one of our latest fights. There will still be that standing yellow flag for the drivers. And as they pass up by, we'll get into green flags as shown there by the marshals. It's Stinson v Sanchez for what is now 3rd place. Albeit there are differences in strategy of their fellow AM drivers around them. Danny Felix, one among them, who came into the pits not too long ago. And now we get to see Carina Stinson is put in a position here where she can more than definitely fight for position. You see, though, she's got quite present company behind her. The 119 of Christian LeBay, namely. Now, technically speaking, she doesn't have any reason to shift out of the way of LeBay. This isn't a case where she's shown the blue flags. They are on the same lap, and technically speaking, they are still fighting for overall position. Now, it's more of a courtesy thing than anything. We see their trouble for Veldkamp, grinding out past the wall. This is going to be an interesting one. LeBay for the inside, down at Forrest's elbow, nearly contact. So he knew that she wasn't going to move out of the way. Not that she had any reason to. There weren't any blue flags to stipulate that rule set. We see, though, this is quite an interesting point because you consider with LeBay's history in GT racing, this is a car he spent 4 seasons competing in over on the NLRL Sunday League, and we saw every race among them. We saw his rise to championship glory, and you could see why that car was such a good pick, because that is one of a very rare number of cars that can stay that close to the Mustang. Diving to the pits then goes Sanchez. That forces Carina Stinson up to 3rd in the AMs at the moment. And it's been a very solid performance by her today. There has been a story of consistent improvements here by Stinson across GT4 and GT3. So if this is the first time we'll see her into the top 5 this season, we'll have a quick glance through her last couple of results here. I do think we are on for our looks of things here. A first of appearances to the top 5 for her. Let's have a little look here on the AM standings. See that Stinson right now, as it would happen, best result has been 6th place. That was achieved over at round 5 of the Red Bull Ring. So she's still yet to have seen a top 5. I'd say with performance like this today, that's not far off a question. And she raced at the 2 hours of Nords earlier today as well. I mean, it's longevity on these drivers. You can't argue with that one. I have a lot of respect for the kind of driver who can sit down and do multiple races in one day. There are plenty of drivers I know of that do 2-3 races a day on this game, and they're just constantly grinding away at it. If that's the approach she's taken to it, then all power to her. She's definitely going to get a lot more experience as time goes on. I have no doubts in my mind she's going to get more and more competitive on this grid. I'd say even by the end of this season. There's pretty good hopes for that one. I think one of the major things that she's tried to knuckle down on has been, well, A, controlling the car. The V12 Vantage is an angry machine, almost entirely fueled by its hatred for anything that grips the wheel. As we've already seen for LeBay, and we've spoke with LeBay about this before, that car is very involved to drive. It's very alien to anything else in GT3, and you drive it almost specifically because you want the challenge of driving it. And B has been nailing down consistency. Right now, she's not put a foot wrong. So there's every chance that she could see a top 5 by the end of this race. Right now, stands in 2nd in division under strategy at the moment. We see Aiden Christie now in, having dropped off the jacks, the 616. Oh my God, look at the state of Andrew Veldkamp's car. I didn't quite see it from when we were running down through sector 2 and 3. Oh my word. Yeah, insurance ain't covering that, mate. That is bad. Oh my goodness. I didn't see it the first time. You see now into the pit lane, Bedensky in the 505. It's been a bit of a mixed bag today for Let's Race, mate, for both the 505 and the number 6, now both into the pit lane. It's worth noting here for Cedric Grenier-Massey. It's a case where he started from the pit lane down in 21st place. with 20 cars rolling down to the line. He was 21st from the pit lane, has come into this now, and now, as it would happen overall on the grid, as he comes into the pits, is in 11th. Division-wise, 4th. Could be closer to the front by the end of this race. There's a lot of promise now speaking in and around the AM division. Belder still confidently in the lead. I don't think Holkianos can be shaken off of that top step. No doubt in my mind there. Belder has had a phenomenal performance and mirroring a lot of the same qualities he brought to the table in his maiden win over in Silverstone race 3 of round 1. The Spaniard has been on top form throughout today. Nothing to criticise there from him. We do see, though, 3 drivers still anticipated to the pit lane at the front of that field, and we're coming up about 2 minutes away from that optimum strategy window. We've seen a lot of drivers undercut it, such as the case for drivers like Brooklyn Donkin, who, as it would stand right now, is going to be second in this race, ahead of Christie and LeBay when these top 3 come into the pits. Dalan Such still leads this one. No surprises there. That 45 has had unmistakable performance on today's grid. And even viewer polls had it read in that number 45 would lead out of lap 1. There was 60 to 40 in the votes there. And 11.5 seconds up the road from Brooklyn Donkin. Does it come as any a surprise? The 45 is about to lead once again here in Bathurst. Having a glance in then to see nearest fight, Aiden Christie versus Christian LeBay. Now this is to retake a provisional podium, so Mustang against Mustang. Aiden Christie in the 32 fighting off against Christian LeBay. Now it's worth pointing out over on the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series, Christie already has quite an esteemed profile for a very short appearance in that series so far. Aiden Christie won in the last round. Paul Ricard, round 7 in the AM category. Now making his way up to GT3 here in Competizione Performance League. Karina Stinson, after what has been a brilliant stint so far, now into the pits. We'll see where she comes out of the pits. There is obviously still the considerations of Belder. Now dropping off the jacks. Danny Felix will move up into second. Ivan Sanchez is actually around the corner right now, so there is the chances here. Stinson is going to stay on for a podium after these first run of pit stops. She's played this very, very well. I'd say it was only a matter of time until we saw her to the top 5, and she's done one more on that and put us in currently instead of a podium. We see right now that could still be up for grabs because right behind there is Ivan Sanchez, the number 91, now contending for third. That's going to be one to pick up on in the next couple of minutes here. We are approaching that first 40-minute stint end. So for Tanguay, Wright and Belder, if that's the strategy they're adhering to, this is now the time to come in. It's been a very brutal race, though. I will say that much. We're down to 17 functional vehicles on track at the moment with Didier Potvin. I'd say it's now a soft DNF we're looking at here from the 35. Unlikely to be a case where he comes back out to see the checkered flag, but of course it has happened before, so let's not write that one off. We'll leave you on board at the moment with Tanguay and come back to you. Actually, no, we're going to go on board here quickly to see Christie and LeBay making their way down through turn 1. We see them following through at turn 1. We're also going to go and catch on board with that upcoming fight then, Stinson v Sanchez. This is the fight for Division 2nd right now. Danny Felix leads that charge. Actually, Division 3rd, sorry. Felix in 2nd. Belder leads. It's easy to forget how far up the order Sergio Belder is. Eclipsed almost entirely by that huge rear wing assembly. Ivan Sanchez 0.4 of a second away from Karina Stinson as we make our way onto the Conrad. 1.9 kilometers. Now, this is a curious case, as we saw when she followed along with the 119 of LeBay. That V12 Vantage has a very clear and cutaway advantage on the Mustangs. It can stay very close with, and in this situation where she's leading over Sanchez, put a few tenths on top of the Mustang just before the run into the chase. A brilliant soundtrack, though. Naturally aspirated engines all around here. 5.9 litre V12 versus 5.4 litre V8. A brilliant soundtrack to go along with. We see here from Ben Cheeseman making his way down through the S. It's about 8 seconds off from Aiden Christie at the moment. We'll go and catch on board with the attacking side of this fight then to get on board with that of Ivan Sanchez. 8 tenths away from Stinson. We'll follow on board with him for this fight of third, and we'll be back to you in just a moment's time, as we've just got wind as well of the recent move to the pit for the number, looking here, 65, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, Sergio Belda now into the pit lane. Zalan Such will now overtake into third. Wright still holds second, and Tangray in first. See a bit of trouble there for Ivan Sanchez. That's to let on through the advance. Looking here of Andrew Veldkamp to unlap himself, peculiarly enough. So this is a bit of a curious case of Sanchez letting Veldkamp on through. Normally it would be the case where the 616 has to unlap of his own accord. It seems to be a case where, could it be a case where Sanchez has maybe mixed up Veldkamp with that of LeBay? See, it has created a larger gap now between Sanchez and Stinson. Now, taking a look at the wider order of things, once again, see the Sergio Belda, as it happens, still leads here in Bathurst. Danny Felix in second, Karina Stinson in third, and Ivan Sanchez in fourth. Cedric Grenier-Massey now fifth in the AMS, with Budensky sixth, Mal's in seventh, Veldkamp in eighth, Quito ninth, Black in 10th. Potvin still a soft DNF. So 10 cars left from the Anfield, 7 left from Pro. And in the Pro category at the moment, still yet to have taken their pit stops is Tangray and Wright at the lead of this race. Zalan Such in third with the fastest lap. Donkin in fourth. Very clever pit strategy from the number 17. The Brit now finds themselves at a provisional second place once we see Tangray and Wright into the pit lane. LeBay currently ranks in fifth, Christie sixth, and Cheeseman in seventh. It has been a difficult day. The 113 is out of this race. The number 55 is out of this race. We've got plenty of drivers gone from this grid. And we also have, sadly, that number 5 also out of this race. That's our 3 DNFs at the moment, and I would say that's technically coming up on 4 DNFs here, with Didier Potvin now sitting from the sidelines in the number 35 down in 18th. We see their trouble. Hang on, who's that for? It's the 707. Yes, it was there for Stephen Black. Washed out at the chase, as it would happen. Turns 21 and 22. Back on track, though. Minimal damages. Just a touch onto the grass. Sanchez still in pursuit here of Stinson. You can see they're caught between traffic. And actually, I'd say a more recent introduction there of Cedric Grenier-Massey. This could certainly bring an interesting light in on this fight for the podium. We see this is 3rd, 4th, and 5th in the AM division at the moment, contesting a podium, led forward by Andrew Veldkamp in his efforts to unlap himself. Zalan Such is only 5 seconds away, so the blue flags will be showing for these drivers not long from now. We follow here with Ivan Sanchez, the man in the middle. Half a second in front, half a second behind. He's sandwiched in between Aston Martin and BMW, with the Lexus just looming over their shoulder. You can see there in the background is Zalan Such in 3rd in this race. And encountering lapped traffic as well. This is a very difficult spot to try and navigate. So this will be facing both sides of it, with Stinson trying to keep up with Veldkamp to unlap, well, to lap past the 616, and for Zalan Such to try and lap out past these 3 in front of him. It's not going to be an easy task at all. with them packed in like sardines in this middle sector up through to Solman and McPhillamy. Aston versus Ford versus BMW. It's worth noting, though, Grenier Massey starting to lag behind a little bit. 9 tenths to the 2 tenths between Sanchez and Stinson, down through to Skyline. It's worth noting as well, in the case of Karina Stinson, much more linear braking model there for the Aston Martin. She's not really trail braking too much in these corners. She's getting a lot of the braking done in a straight line and then hammering it through the corner. That really does seem to be paying dividends here. I mean, that's something they teach you, I believe, in front-wheel drive racing, if I'm not mistaken. You get a lot of the braking done in a straight line and then go for the corner. You can see for that reason, that's why the Aston has been so incredibly stable here in Bathurst so far, because she's not been pushing the car beyond what it can give her. The V12 Vantage, it's a visceral driving machine. You got to drive it like it's of the period, and since it's an older car, more advanced methods just will not suffice. Talan Such trying to get out past then Ivan Sanchez. Does so down at Murray. Sanchez gives him the space. In the same way that it requires a certain skill set to drive the Porsche, is what we're seeing a lot in these older cars like the Jaguar and the Aston. You can't drive it like you can a modern GT3 because it will throw you into a wall. And I know it seems absurd to speak of it that way because, you know, it's a car from 2013. We're hardly talking the 80s here when it comes to these machines. But when you consider the cars we're seeing here, this is a 2024 Ford Mustang on the grid at the moment. Behind him is a 2022 BMW. We're talking cars that are still upwards of a decade ahead in development. Look at the technical regs difference between 2016's Formula One and now. Now, albeit, you can make a bit more of a layered comment on that, but I would say if you want to take a look even further, 2011 and 2021. Worlds apart. 10 years can make a big difference in any motorsport, and that will drastically change how you tackle driving the machine. Yes, of course, the cars look the same, and you can definitely make an argument that they've not changed too much in concept. They are still sports and supercars, heavily augmented, under the same kind of philosophy as a touring car, but with a lot more technology backing it up to turn it into the Grand Touring Car, as it's known. But at its core, a lot has still changed. We saw up in front, Veldkamp clattered the wall off the exit of Forest's elbow, and that's just free slipstream now for Stinson. 8 tenths, that's going to continue to grow on the Conrod, gets up past him on the run to the chase. Grenier Massey super late on the brakes, my goodness. And we see him nearly tip himself over down at the chase. I mean, had he been able to commit to a lunge there, that may very well have been one of the longest lunges I've ever seen. Up and around turn 1, then back in with each other, 6 tenths apart on the run up the mountain straight. It's rare we get to see this kind of lineup where it's a V12 versus a V8, because we talk more about the lineup between a naturally aspirated engine and a turbocharged one. That's where we get to see on these very vertical tracks, like we see at the sort of middle sector for the run uphill through Imola, like we get to see here in Bathurst, like we also get to see over at Laguna Seca, tracks with a lot of verticality involved, where you're accelerating uphill. We see the turbocharged cars get a lot of advantage out of, even over cars that have quite torque-heavy engines like the Mustang. We get to see it, though, here with 2 NA engines. It is quite a primordial case here. You just have more cylinders involved, and that's what's giving you the advantage. So we see V12 versus V8, more cylinders, more power at that point. It's a very simple philosophy to go up against with NA engines, as opposed to when you need to get turbos involved in these matchups. You see, though, Stinson is starting to lag behind in the trailing end of that middle sector. As we get onto the Conrod straight here, that's where the Aston is just going to be able to set sail here, out through turn 19. Just hammer down, it's gone. It's gone with the wind there. 0.7. As we mount the crest then, 0.8. In towards the chase, I'd say it could very well be 0.9, but no, as we get down onto the brakes there. Actually, yes, it is 0.9. Just night and day difference for the V12 Vantage on that back straight. It feels like for a decent amount of the season, Karina Stinson has spent a lot of time in the AM category trying to find her groove on this grid, and I think today we really have found it on that number 800. As this has been exemplary stuff here in Bathurst. Now, coming back into the talks amongst the pro grid here to take a look in with LeBay, it's been a very bizarre state of affairs, especially when you consider that front row of Tanguay and Wright, 8.5 seconds from one another. Neither of them have pulled the trigger for the run to the pit lane. This has been a very bizarre call. Normally, under the strategies and regs we have in these rounds, these 2-hour races, we would have seen these two drivers come in 13 minutes ago. Neither of them have even considered it once. We also get to have a brief word here. Casey Miles has emerged from the pit lane after taking his final pit stop, is now cleared for the checkered flag, and I believe with the Vantage he could very well race that consistently for an hour and 7 minutes. I'm pretty sure he has enough fuel to last him that long. I think for these GT3s you can get in and around, it depends on the circuit really, but in and around an hour and 10, hour and 20 at a push, but you've got to be clever about it. Tanguay stays out. We'll see if Wright is the first to pull the trigger on that front row. Number 54 out through the chase, and as it would happen, no. Steadfast in their convictions to stay out until at least the hour mark. I'd say that's when the next possible window would be for them. Of course, they do have to take 2 mandatory pit stops, so we've seen them do this before. We've seen drivers pick up on pitting at the direct halfway mark of the race and then playing a more adverse strategy in the second half. We don't know how much success that's going to hope to yield for them. Now, one of the upsides of Bathurst, in spite of its monstrous size, is its incredibly short pit lane. It's actually one of the shorter ones in circulation, very quick in and out process. And that does make pit stops at this track very snappy in comparison to other circuits of similar size. You see here in the recent fights for Sanchez v Stinson, the last interval showed it at 1.1 seconds. We catch on to see with them though it's now 0.8 as they make their way onto the mountain straight here. We'll cut away from them to see what's going on with the rest of the field. Now taking a look into where some of the nearby fights could be coming from. Of course, the closest among them is still Stinson v Sanchez at this time. Having a glance in to see though from the rest of the field's point of view. And Cheeseman still on the charge here. And as it would happen, only about 2.4 seconds away from Aiden Christie. He's actually got clear line of sight on him just over the shoulder of Casey Miles' Aston Martin. Number 96 with Team Raceline. Been shown the blue flags there to move over for the 114 5-star esports Lambo. Credit where credit's due here. Cheeseman has done remarkably well. And we had those very early worries for him with that vehicle choice. There's a very big unease, as it would be, surrounding the Lamborghini on corner-intensive tracks. We've seen that it can, in the right hands, and such as the hands here of Cheeseman, be used very effectively, but it is a car that, even for the pros, is very rough around the edges, especially when you start pushing. We see he's right in flow state at the moment. As I say that, into the wall. Oh, my words. Commentator's curse is a real thing, folks. Look it up. Oh, wow. That was a big, big hit for him. Also up in front, trouble for Matthew Podensky. The 505 in trouble down the S's. That's a big, big hit from the wall. I thought that was a little too close of a clip to the wall for it to not be substantial for him. Ben Cheeseman in jeopardy then. Just had to open my mouth and speak on it. Could that be an encouraging factor to bring him into the pits in the next couple of minutes? Is he going to try and firm things out with the aero? There is damage to that front. Not significant, though. It will have a knock-on effect, but nothing drastic that would keep him otherwise from continuing to pursue Christie. We'll wait for updates on that one And there still is the elephant in the room that is David Tangray and Wright. Neither of them still yet considering options for the pit lane. You see, though, for Ben Cheeseman, he's not going to waste any time with formalities here. 1 hour and 3 minutes left to go, and he's coming in to the pits for the second and last time, albeit not of his own volition this time around. Big hit for him down through Reed into Solman in that middle sector. Into the pits goes the Lamborghini. Checking back in then, Sanchez v Stinson, as we now see them intercepted by Stephen Black up through Quarry. Very nearly trouble there for Ivan Sanchez. Running the long distance round. It's contact between the pair of them. Oh my word, into the wall. A huge, huge incident there. The 91 of Ivan Sanchez clipped by the 707. Oh my word, get a look at this on the replays here. It is catastrophic. Out through Reed into Solman. So nearly collected there. Cedric Grenier-Massey's BMW. A huge, huge hit there. We also see in, I think that was, I want to say that was Andrew Veldkamp that clattered the wall pretty hard there, but wasn't involved in that incident himself. You see now the aftermath for Ivan Sanchez, and in the time since, David Tangray has now come into the pit lane. But that is a huge hit, and that has really kicked a lot of the confidence out of the sails there of the 91. It is still a Holkianos car leading this race in the AMS, that being Sergio Belda, but Sanchez is fading after that incident. And he was just trying to get out past. I'm really not sure what to make of that situation. The 707 should have probably backed off a lot more. He knows he has no reason to be fighting with these cars or even matching the speed of these cars. Now we see the 707 is back into the pit lane. I would say this is a lot more of a freak accident we're looking at here. That's the problem with traffic here at Bathurst. It shows up at the worst possible time. This has now continued to solidify Karina Stinson's current hold of a podium here in Bathurst, with Cedric Grenier-Massey sustaining damage as it would happen. He's now into the pit lane as well. But Badensky, they stay out at the moment and now take up the helm of a Division 4th. Sanchez is in. So too is Veldkamp. We saw that huge hit from against the wall just in the trailing end of that replay. A massive incident down at Reed and Solman. You get to see here side by side for about a moment the 54 of Wright getting up and around that of JM Quito at the chase. You see in the case here of Wright is continuing to stay out as part of what is a newly found Lexus 1-2. With the rest of the competition right now folding into the pit lane, Karina Stinson may have just found herself with the mother of all Deus Ex Machinas to put herself on for a podium. She has had brutally consistent performance, as we've already seen here. Has been tremendously efficient in the Aston Martin, and considering the struggles she's faced in the last couple of rounds, this is a very gratifying turn of events for the number 800. Not only is she on the cusp of seeing the first of her top fives in this season, she is also on the cusp of seeing her first podium in the AMS. It's been a phenomenal drive for the Aston. When we consider looking back to the struggles she's had with the V12 Vantage, this is a broad change of pace. I'd say in that recent incident, she's gotten very lucky to be not in the firing line there. As we made our way up through the cuttings, we see for Cedric Grenier-Massey, it's more damage. I think that could very well be it for the number 6. He's emerged from the pit lane, mangled through there in the BMW. Number 6 in critical condition. We're past the halfway mark here in Bathurst, and it has been absolutely brutal. Sanchez in at the moment, still getting repairs. Black still in the pit lane. It could likely be a soft DNF for him there after that incident with Sanchez. They managed to patch the car up, though, so the Holkianos number 91 is back out on its way to the pit exit. Casey Malles, as it would happen, is just a little too far away to intercept. We see, though, in the case of having a glance in there for the BMW of Badensky, is going to lap out past Sanchez, holding on to that 4th place spot at the moment. They're side by side on the run in towards turn 2 at Griffin's Bend. That does kill off a lot of those previous fights then. It does leave us again in this state of limbo where a lot of drivers are just trying to survive this track, as we've seen has become quite the priority, I should say, in the last couple of laps. Right, now into the pit lane. That's the last of our first mandatory pit stops. A very late strategy then. We did call it in advance that maybe he'd be running for that halfway strat. We now see another driver having dropped away, bringing the current tally of vehicles available left on this track down to our, having a glance at it here with Black still in the pit lane. It's going to be 15 cars left in this race on what started on a grid of 21. We're now down the scope of 6. Grenier Massey is back into the pit lane. So too is Wright. We also see in the paddock as well. Appears to be that of, having a look here, though not showing it, that is, I want to say that is, which car is that? Is that the 35? It is. It's Potvin. Oh, yes, still in the pit. Oh, yes, of course. I forgot that he was still in the pit lane. Yes, I'm confused for a second there because, of course, in this series, the Malwar cars still have their older color scheme. Now, over on some of the other series we've seen, they've changed it up to where it makes a little bit more sense what they're driving. We've seen it over on the GT4 Pro-Am Cup. They now actually have the cars color-coded by rank in terms of their Pro drivers, their Elite drivers, and their Am drivers. So it's a little easier for us because they have a habit of rocking the same manufacturer. A lot of them, a great majority of them, are driving for Chevrolet in that series. So it just makes things a little easier to correct by eye. But they don't have that as of right now in GT3, at least on the same degree. So it is still very easy to mix those cars up. I believe now on this second stop for Grenier Massey, technically his third overall in this race, this is the one that'll get the car patched up and ready to go. So as we drop past the halfway mark here of round 8 of the World Series, Zalan Such leads over Brooklyn Donkin with David Tanguay in 3rd, Wright in 4th, and LeBay now in 5th place. A curious turn of events here for the 119. Now having dropped to the back of that top 5, had a great qualifying position and places him in a very tough spot here with 56 minutes to the checkered flag. 6th place then for Aidan Christie. And as for the Lamborghini, that was one of the latest ones to drop out, the 114 of Ben Cheeseman, bringing the current tally of Pro drivers down at only 6 to the 11 Am drivers left on this grid. Speaking of the Ams, Sergio Belda leads over Danny Felix with Karina Stinson on for a first podium of the season. Badensky in 4th with Sanchez very close behind in 5th. Strategically speaking, if he doesn't have it on track, he is going to have it in the pit lane to get back up into that top 4. 6th place for Mal, 7th for Quito, 8th for Grenier Massey, and 9th for Veldkamp. Mal's definitely within the firing line here, strategy-wise, to move up to a top 5. Not too far off the current distance then, about 7 seconds from Sanchez, who is still, as we speak, going toe-to-toe with Matthew Badensky. Now, in terms of the wider strategy, we've seen drivers already go for earlier stops, and now we actually get to see one, surprisingly enough, here by a far distance from what we were originally going to claim on here for Badensky. Into the pit lane, 55 minutes left to go. Now, we were going to expect them around 5 to 7 minutes, roughly, there, from the 40-minute mark of this race. That's where it would have made a lot more sense. But we see these very early strategies creeping in now for the Let's Race mate number 505 of Matthew Badensky. Now into the pits. Sanchez moves up to 4th. Mals moves up to 5th. As of right now, Holciano still hold that ground at the front of the Am field. Still dominant in class. Of course, taking a look back into the team standings for this round. Coming into it, Holciano's lead over the Malwar Racing Team Am division, and that's only going to continue to open up as the season crawls to a close. Of course, taking a look back to that calendar, after this round, we've got one more 3x40 at the Hungaroring on May 16th, and then the week after that, May 23rd, is when we head in to the last stop of the season, the Nürburgring, for one last 2-hour race like what we have today. And that'll bring us to the end of the championship, where 4 different titles will be won the Pro Teams Championship, the AM Teams Championship, the Pro Drivers Championship, and the AM Drivers Championship. And in the absence right now of the current championship leader, Richard Cecil, Sergio Belder has the chance here to bring things back into the lead. Taking a look then in towards the current standings for the AMs coming in towards this round. We discussed them earlier on. We had to make a bit of an update for that between Cecil and Belder. But getting a look at things right now, just doing some quick maths on this one, the gap between these two currently stands in 31 points in contention at the front of the field. Now, when you consider Cecil is a DNF in this race, Belder right now leads it. Taking a look at the scoring system for this round, he's going to be up 35 points. So unless the drop point system can sweep in to save Richard Cecil, it will be a case where Sergio Belder stands to lead this championship heading into the 3x40 at the Hungaroring next weekend by 4 points. And we already saw it's been very thin so far at the front of the field for the AMs. This will be the closest we've had it in a long time. LeBay is in during this conversation on his last pit stop then from the back of what is now only 5 pro cars remaining. It has been an incredibly tough race for these drivers. Bathurst is a brutal, brutal circuit. Make no mistake of it. Cal Ford just saying, did I hear a puppy? Yes, you did. I tried to just ignore the barking every now and again because she barks at everything at this age, but no, that is we have a puppy in the background. She's, I think, 8-9 months old now. Labrador. Very, very energetic. What's his name? Oh, it's a she. We weren't particularly imaginative when naming her because she was part of a wider litter. We just sort of gave them placeholder names for a while. Then when we realized the placeholders weren't going to work, we just started calling them Puppy, and then that devolved into Poppy. So it's just like, we'll just call them that from here on out. So yeah, that's what she's called. We weren't particularly imaginative with that one, but it's a name that stuck, and it seems to fit her quite nicely. Watching in then with LeBay, having dropped to 6th overall in the race. Now, it's worth considering there are still, as it stands, 7 drivers yet to have taken their last mandatory pit stop. We see these are 2 soft DNFs from the pit lane, which is why they're not counted towards that equation. We see then Zalan Suits continues to lead. So about 10 minutes is roughly where we're expecting the WOD of these final pit stops to emerge in from. Again, in line with the strategy of a 2-stop strategy this race, bringing this 120-minute race down into 3 stints of 40. The first 40 minutes, then they come in, do another 40 stints, then come in here when we've got 4 minutes left to go in the race, and then get to the checkered flag. That's your baseline strategy. Now, we've seen drivers, such as the case for some like that of, for example, Brooklyn Donkin, and this has worked phenomenally well for the British talent over the course of today's race. Early stops have been the go-to here. He's undercut this by a few minutes apiece so far in that first stop, and that's given him premier command of that podium for the time being. Zalan Such still leads this, of course, but Brooklyn Donkin now emerges from what was the back end of the podium at the start of the race, where he was contending with drivers like Wright and Tangway, and we see now undercutting by about 9 minutes here. Will it work the second time for Brooklyn Donkin? The aim right now is a front row finish, and we know more than any what he's capable of. We also see in the pit lane recent troubles here for Danny Felix. Damage from the number 985. Could this be the red letter day that brings in Karina Stinson to a 2nd place contention spot? We'll see for her. She makes her way down through to the chase. What a soundtrack that is from that Aston Martin. Unmistakable engine note. It's emblematically Aston Martin, a brand that doesn't really go with the times. It's a very old-fashioned kind of company. And while they, yes, are more than capable of developing modern technology, they'll still be affixed with ideas of these old-fashioned design philosophies. Like, for example, the Valkyrie. It would have been more efficient on paper to put a turbocharged V8 or a turbocharged V6 in there, have it smaller, more compact, more energy intensive. But they didn't want to do that. A V12 is cooler, and a V12 sounds better. And the pure motto of Aston Martin as a brand is intensity driven. You don't get anything intense about a V6. You don't get anything intense about, you know, a sort of high revving V8. Unless it's a NASCAR V8, you know, that's a big change. There is something eagerly intense of 12 cylinders. It's the same kind of engine that won Britain the Second World War. The Rolls-Royce Merlin was a V12. Putting V12s in things that don't require V12s is just something systematically British that Aston Martin is obsessed with doing. And you can see it in WEC. It's not very competitive to have a V12 in a car, but they did it anyway. And they dumped millions into it. And they're still using it. And we got one podium in Road Atlanta. So I would say that's more than a success. 47 minutes left to go then in this race, and for Karina Stinson now stands amongst second place in the AMS. The highest result she's ever seen in this series. Was already on for a podium, but with recent troubles there for Danny Felix, has now opened the doors up on a possibility to stay in second by the end of today's race. Now, of course, there are still 5 drivers left to come into the pits, and we already saw an early strategy adopted there by Brooklyn Donkin. We saw an even earlier one by Christian Labey. These two rank in 4th and 5th on the grid and in category at the moment. In the case of Donkin, he's trying to usurp any kind of position off of Tanguay and Wright. He's still gunning for a front row finish and is more than capable at the time of doing so. 46.5 minutes left to go. We're about 6 minutes out from that optimum strategy. All those 3 40-minute stints. I'd say it's far from over here in Bathurst. See with the race leader then, Talan Such. And it's lonely at the top here for that Lexus. Has walked alone for the majority of this race. Impeccable pace. Fastest lap of the race as well, 2 minutes, 5:45. And to give an understanding on just how fast the 45 has been in this race, he's only about a corner and a half away from Labey, who is at the back of the top 5 of what started as a 21-car grid. That is not pace that just magics up from thin air. Talan Such is different when it comes to this track. We've seen that capable performance in his hands in Silverstone. We saw it in Spa, and now we see it here in Bathurst. This is a man who, by looks of things, just cannot be shaken off the trail. Now, that's not to say he's had a perfect season. He's not, had everything he's wanted his way. In his return to the season, he was still competitive. But as it would happen there, looking in his last couple of results, he has fallen to the low lows of second. Oh, it was great for setting up the punchline. We see more trouble, though, for Danny Felix. Hang on, just a tick here. Watching here with Talan Such, there is Danny Felix down at turn 18, stranded at Forest's elbow. It's a pity when you consider the performance that Talan Such has as a driver and his limited number of appearances in this championship. Because if he was able to commit to a full-time drive, I'd have very few suspicions in my mind that he would have had the championship by now. When you consider his worst result's been second, and this is of 5 races he's participated in over 3 rounds. When you have a winning percentage of coming into this race, a winning percentage of 80% of all rounds you participated in the season. That is a warning sign for everyone else who steps onto the grid with you. "43 minutes then left to go." We'll see here from Tanguay, currently second on the field. Is there any chances he'll be ducking into the pit lanes early? Not by the looks of things here. And we'll see from right if anything is liable to change. But the last two are anything to go by. It's unlikely. Third time there on the charm as well. 54 stays out. Donkin, of course, we saw him into the pits far earlier. Dobby in chat saying that kid is built different indeed. It's unmistakable performance. Drivers like this come around only once every couple of seasons, and it is brutal when you see them. And watch this as well. When we go into like season 2, there's that 50-50 chance he just won't show up. He'll never be here again. You've got to savor the moment whilst you have it to see these drivers this fast, hard at work. I'd say a driver in this sort of league that has been consistently on that level has been Christian Lebert. We saw it in Jaguar, we saw it in GT4, and he still leads this championship here in the World Series. It's just been a case where the pace today is just not added up for him. It is a tough track, and even the most astute and experienced of drivers like Lebert will struggle under these conditions. We've said this since the start of the stream. This is a brutal, brutal circuit, and it does not discriminate on whose race it decides to just destroy. And that's what we've seen. Belder stays out. Stinson still in second place for the time being. As for the top three in Pro, Zalan Such is coming in. So undercutting that strategy by about 2 minutes. He would have had the opportunity to maybe go for one more lap before coming in, but he's calling things a little earlier there on lap 38. Into the pits he goes. David Tanguay now on the Conrod straight, and so too is Wright from second and third. Now this is going to weigh quite heavy on the shoulders here of Brooklyn Donkin. Driver who's played this early strategy to a T so far to put himself second place here in Bathurst. The number 17 on his way out through McPhillamy. Still a fair distance from his contemporaries up on the podium. We see for Tanguay, he'll stay out. For Wright, making his way into the chase, he'll be next on considerations. We'll see what he chooses to do. Danny Felix being in the pit lane is going to possibly invite Badensky back into the fray here to fight for a podium. When you consider how up and down today's performance has been for the Let's Racemate team, we find themselves among that top 5 in the AM Teams Championship. If Badensky can turn this one back into a podium, that is absolutely going to be the silver lining to what has been quite a hefty dark cloud on their performance today. You see for Badensky, back up into third in the AM division. David Tanguay then leading here in Bathurst, playing for a longer strategy. And as it would appear, going out past that 40-minute margin. Did see a little bit of a wobble for him in through to Quarry. 9.6 seconds in the lead over Wright in second place. Zalan Such emerges as it happens there third on the grid. Brooklyn Donkin just on his way onto the mountain straight. Karina Stinson now in for her last stop on what has been a brilliant performance by her so far. We'll see what comes of it in due course. With Badensky just starting the charge uphill through the Quarry corner. Stinson's got plenty of time here to hold that second place spot in the AMs. Sergio Belder then has been leagues ahead in this race, now actually lapping out past Karina Stinson in the number 65. Belder, on an unmistakable performance here in Bathurst, has put seldom a foot wrong in terms of consistency and pace. And this could be the turning point that brings Holkianos to the lead of the Drivers' Championship over in AM, to the dismay of the number 5 of Richard Cecil. He'll be hoping that drop point system helps him out here to take away some of the blow of that last round gone. Or of this round gone, I should say. Looking in the AM standings, of course, we mentioned earlier the gap was 31 points between those two at the front of the field. When you consider that Cecil's worst result nullified was a 4th place, this is likely to be a case then where this is going to be very, very close between these drivers as of right now. because that DNF is definitely going to be one that's sliced away under the drop point system. So that fourth will come back into play. That's the complexity of working with a drop point system. You have to factor multiple races in advance, really, or multiple races in lieu on the run in towards these rounds, especially as the championship closes in. So as it stands right now, no suggestion on when these three will come into the pits. They're playing well past the last margin of that 3 40-minute stint strategy. Tanguay, Wright, and Belder. I'd say it's a likelihood here, seeing that everyone behind him has come into the pits way before him, and Belder still holds a country mile over the nearest car. We saw him quite literally lap out past second place a moment ago. I'd say now more than ever is a great opportunity to come into the pits. He's got a clear line of sight on traffic. He'll be emerging into a nice pocket there, but he's going to stay out. He's going to stay out. It's curious to try and get into the mind of some of these drivers, because of course we can't really ascertain what it is they're thinking. You see for Zalan Such, as it happens, he's only 22 seconds from the lead, so he will more than definitely move back up into the lead of this race. But there raises the question for Brooklyn Donkin. Now, he's 26 seconds behind the 45 at this time, with the pit lane runs taking upwards of about a minute here. It's going to be close. Now, I'd say that's a bit of a push, really, for it to be a minute. As it happens, the leading duos stay out onto this next lap, onto lap 40 of racing here in Bathurst. Under 37 minutes left to go. Still watching from the 45's point of view as he makes his way onto lap 40. And just thinking back to the last couple of incidents then, looking back to what was that major collision earlier on in this race for I think, yes, it was for Sanchez. Looking back into it, and this was the incident down through Quarry. There was a collision between the then being lapped 707 of Stephen Black and the number 91 of Ivan Sanchez. That has been probably one of the biggest wipeouts of today's race. We'll see it again on the replay, how it unfolded. We also saw just in trailing end was a clatter there for the 616. That ultimately brought him to the pits as well. This was down from Reed Park into Solman Park. A huge incident for these two earlier on in today's race. We see through the same section here, just scraping past the wall of death through Solman and McPhillamy. Zalan Such, a man on a mission. We'll see here for Wright, another Lexus on the track at the moment, making his way down the Conrod Straight. It's about a 280, is just glancing there above 287 kilometers an hour. So rapid pace we're seeing from the Lexus cars on that back straight. Some of the fastest on this track. I'd say it's a bit of a stalemate they find between themselves, Ford, BMW, and Aston Martin. So if we go to locate that Aston Martin as well, see if the number 800 is nearby. No, they're on the mountain straight at the moment, so we'll catch on with Stinson when she makes her way in towards the Conrod Straight, just to see as well what that was looking like for the V12 Vantage. We've also got word there that Sergio Belder has now come in and is now on his way out of the pit lane, so a very quick stop in the time since for the number 65. Of course, we'll re-emerge to the track still in the lead, just having lost that lap that he had over Karina Stinson, who still holds second on the track so far. Two drivers left in contention then, with Veldkamp, as it happens, still in the pit lane, now 2 laps down. I think in the case of the 616 here, that's the end of the road for Andrew Veldkamp. A bittersweet ending to racing here in Bathurst. You see clatter in the wall from behind. That was a big hit there for having a glance. That was the 90, no, it was the 26 It was the 26 of JM Quito that had quite a considerable knock at Solomon Park. You see he's held his right side indicator on. Out through to the run of things here at Forest's Elbow. See there, he's been able to turn the indicator off now as he makes his way onto the Conrod. And sadly, we missed out on it when Stinson was flying down this back straight here. See for Casey Malles at the moment. Currently ranks in, as it would happen, among the division top 5. So Aston Martin take 2 positions of the top 5 right now. That might very well be among their first this season. When we take a look into the Astons that are competing from the AM category, there are 2 to consider in total. Karina Stinson and Casey Malles, they're 15th and 16th in the championship. As it would happen, neither of them have seen a top 5 before today. So this not only represents a first for Stinson, it represents a first for Malles and Team Raceline here in the World Series. A series of firsts then. A first podium appearance for Karina Stinson, a first top 5 for Casey Malles, Aston Martin's first top 5 and podium in the World Series. So we've got a catch on board then with David Tangray. This ought to be a rather interesting one to see. You try to locate then the Bentley. We'll be checking from both the Bentley and the Aston to see what those straight line speeds are looking like. What we know of the Bentley is it is quite considerably fast. As a matter of fact, I believe, we do actually have a graphic here, albeit this is one from that of Monza. That still gives you a rough understanding of what we're going up against here with these cars. Especially with the V12 Varnage and the Continental. You can see, though, in the case of Stinson, she's letting Tangray out past. We'll see from the Bentley's point of view here, 286. Now, it's 287 for the Varnage just before it got onto the brake. So at 285, 286, only about a kilometre an hour in difference between the Bentley and the Aston. We'll see, though, for David Tangray. Making his way onto lap 43 of racing then, coming up on 30 minutes left to go here in Bathurst. He's played things the longest of games among the pro drivers of the grid today. As for Wright, also electing to stay out. Makes you wonder how long are they going to try and drag this strategy out for here. They know for a fact they've not got enough time to hold ground off of Zalan Such in the 45. We see, though, recent dismays for Brooklyn Donkin. Now, this is quite a shocking development we see here from the 17. Now, he played a wonderful strategy in the early parts of today's race. And now, as we enter the last 30 minutes, he's nursing front-end damage. The question is that too heavy a load to carry? As it would appear, yes. Out through the chase, way out onto the grass and gravel. Cutting back onto the track here. That could very well be your telltale signs for a pit lane run for the number 17. And that it is. You see that degree of hesitance on him, but I actually think that's more steering damage than anything. In his condition, you wouldn't think twice on running to the pit lane. For Donkin, that could very well bar him from the chances of a podium in today's race. Christian LeBay moves up and ahead of him into 4th. LeBay could turn this one around into the hopes of a podium in today's race. Second place is still up for grabs. We saw from the Bentley, but now one is curious to know what is the speed concerning the Aston Martin. We watch here with Stinson on the back straight, 1.9 kilometers to set in those fastest we saw not long ago. 286, 287 there just about before she got onto the brakes. The Aston still remarkably quick. We saw from the Lexus about 287. Bentley about 286 kilometers an hour. So they're actually quite evenly balanced. So I think it comes down now to the second part of that discussion. That's acceleration. The Aston has plenty of it. A very punchy V12. Donkin now in the pit lane on his way out, as it would happen. Having dropped in behind LeBay. It's not too far off the shout there of Sergio Belda. Donkin still looking at a top 5, but that's of the top 5 surviving Pro Series drivers. Or Pro Class, I should say. Pro Series is a different thing that we also covered here on TRTN in a few rounds. Well, for a few rounds. We do actually have, and this is quite surprising here, folks, we do actually have some surprising news. We've got about 28 minutes left in this race. We do actually have some updates. We spoke about this in HCCL, that these 6 hours of Spa were underway at the time. We now can confirm to you the results of that race. These are the provisional results listed by the FIA and from World Endurance Championship. BMW have secured a 1-2 at the 6 hours of Spa ahead of Ferrari. Aston Martin finished in 4th. I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to scratch my eyes here. I don't believe this. Aston Martin have a top 5 in that Valkyrie. What on earth happened? Well, the final results at the moment from the World Endurance Championship for the hypercar category: BMW 1-2, Ferrari in 3rd, Aston Martin 4th, Toyota in 5th. Ferrari AF Corsa in 6th, Peugeot in 7th, Genesis Magma Racing's number 17 car in 8th, Hertz Team Jota in 9th, and Toyota at the back of the top 10 with the number 8, Alpine 11th and 12th, Genesis in 13th, Aston Martin's 009 in 14th, Ferrari's number 51 in 15th, and Peugeot in 16th, another Hertz Team Jota Cadillac, the 38 car, in 17th. What on earth just happened? I feel like I have to scratch my eyes here. Surely that... You'll have to give me a second here, folks. I'm a big Aston Martin fan. Some of you may know that. You see right now into the pit lane. There ain't no way. When we spoke earlier about the Aston Martin Valkyrie, or at least we mentioned it in passing when discussing the V12 engine, I did not expect them to turn things around the way they did. It was one of the biggest development gambles in motorsports history. And somehow it's working. It took us a season. It took Aston Martin a season to put themselves in that spot. You see Alan Such now up to 2nd. Tangray now the remaining link on this grid. We see JM Keto is into the pit lane, citing serious front end damage. So yeah, that's quite a bizarre thing to see. I'm seeing these results for the first time, just as much as I imagine many of you are watching in at the moment. With the 6 hours of Spa over, Aston Martin have now claimed on their first ever top 5 in World Endurance Championship history. Well, in the hypercar class, I will point that out. They've definitely done, in terms of WEC, they've definitely done more in a lesser time in years gone by, years ago now. That's their first ever hypercar top 5 in WEC. They've got a podium in Road Atlanta over on IMSA. They did that last season, but I'd never have thought they'd do it in WEC. And there are people saying already that if one of the BMWs is under investigation, if they get penalised, Aston Martin could actually have a podium in Spa. That's crazy to me. That is crazy. Painfully, because, of course, we've been working today. We've been broadcasting for these races, which, again, still a big fan of doing. No doubts and no complaints from me here. But because we've been, obviously, streaming all day, we've not been able to watch through on that 6-hour race. So that is very bizarre to see. An actually decent result from Aston Martin's Valkyrie program. I think that's what's good about the hypercar era, though, just speaking reflectively, because you had the same thing with Peugeot for a bit, and Peugeot were rapid in Spa. I don't know what happened for them today. They had a lot of pace coming into this race. And what I liked about... Oh, big hit there for Tanguay. He's all right. Okay, fantastic there. It's good to see that he's come back over the crest. You can see the car's a bit wobbly, though, from him at the moment. Number 30. Now through McPhillamy, and I think he's just going to be taking things nice and cool now. This is definitely looking to be closer to an in-lap for him. You can see the Bentley is struggling under the weight now. With those tyres fading out, it's a pretty sizable chance he'll be coming in on this lap. I'd be genuinely surprised if he turns this into a 47-lap stint. The car's fidgeting under the brakes. I don't know if you saw that down through to the run of things at Forest's elbow. That car was fidgeting quite heavily under the brakes. We now see a newfound fight, Sanchez v Grenier Massey. It's worth pointing out, though, for Sanchez, looks like more front-end damage. As it would happen, then 23 minutes left to go in this race. We see for Cedric Grenier Massey, it's not exactly much a breezier ride for him. That BMW is still fighting him quite harshly here on the run through Solman and McPhillamy in towards the run of things at Skyline. You see that for Tanguay, and this is something I am quite baffled to see, even after that knock, and even after the amount of fidgeting the car's had in the braking zones and through some of the corners up through Solman, McPhillamy, and down through Skyline, he's electing to stay out onto 47 laps of racing. More up the sleeve on that Bentley than we're clued into, evidently. See for Zalan Such. He's in pursuit of David Tanguay, and he's getting closer and closer by the second here, with Tanguay just making his way up to turn 2. We see for the case here of Zalan Such has just come out through turn 1. You see here Sanchez versus Grenier Massey. This is for 11th on the grid, as it would stand among the AM drivers. This is in the talks of 6th place. Actually, as it happens there. Yes, this is 6th place. Watching in then with the AM drivers fighting for 6th in division, 11th overall on track. Seeing here with the defending of 2, Ivan Sanchez through the cuttings at the moment at turns 3 and 4. 21 minutes of racing left to go here in Bathurst at round 8 of the Competizione Performance League World Series. More rubbing against the wall at Quarry. We've seen this already end up bad, and a big hit at the wall again. This area of the track has been cursed for Sanchez. The second major incident he's involved now in that section, out through Frog Hollow into Reed Park, and then through to Solman and McPhillamy. The 91 smited down again. Understeer through that section kept him from the line. He slammed the wall at quite a vigorous pace there. "20 minutes left to go. We'll leave you on board with Tanguay and be back to you in just a moment's time." Tanguay now with just under 19 minutes of racing left to go, still stays out now 49 laps strong as he continues to hold off the lead of this race. Zalan Such in second, though it would appear, having a glance here with the Lexus, a little bit of front end damage. Up in front we see two of the Hulkianos cars, and sandwiched in between them is Brooklyn Donkin. Yes, have a glance in here to see with Zalan Such, that is notable panel gaps over the front bumper, so he has had a bit of a knock there in the 45. Not sure with whom at this time. He still holds on to that provisional lead. Wright currently then in second place, with LeBay in a provisional third and Donkin in a provisional fourth. That all relies really on where Tanguay comes out of the grid from. Right now it's holding off on a very, very long second stint, I should say, of this strategy for the time being. 21 seconds in the lead over Zalan Such. I think the efforts here is to emerge at least on the podium, meaning he's going to try and emerge up and ahead at the very least of Christian LeBay. The gap nearly 40 seconds long from the front to back of the podium. Actually, as it would stand, yes, it is 40 seconds long. Does Tanguay yet have the chances? We'll come to see those. 17 minutes left to go here in Bathurst. The time ticking down at a slower and slower rate, so it feels now, as the drivers wait adamantly to see what happens for the 30. Through to the chase. And as it would appear now, at long last, into the pit lane goes David Tanguay with Bentley and Malwar Racing. Into the pits he goes. Gets things slowed down in time there for the pit limiter. Zalan Such about to move into the lead then. We'll see for Wright as he makes his way onto the Conrod. LeBay just on his way down through the dipper in the S's. Danny Boy 84 saying in the last lap he went slow behind Mal's and touched the wall at Forrest's elbow. That is certainly a strange thing to consider with Such's track record so far here in Bathurst. Would have been a squeaky clean performance for him. We see now with Tanguay emerging from the paddock behind only Zalan Such, as it would appear. So Tanguay has played this very cheeky. I will point that out. And he's played things with a lot of patience involved. Chestnut checkers here for the number 30. And he finds himself second on this grid. I am quite surprised how quickly he was able to get that pit lane run sorted. As Tanguay is released back to the track, he drops in behind Zalan Such, but still ahead of Wright. On for second place then for Malwar Racing, Bentley. As it would happen here for Tanguay, taking a look at his results over the course of the season at large, this does, I believe, put him on his best result, if not his joint best. Having a glance in here to see from Tanguay, his best result of the season. Yes, so it's a joint best for him at the moment. He had 2 second-place finishes in both of the both of the triple stint races we had at the 3x40 last weekend in Barcelona. Of those 3 races, 2 of which were second-place finishes for him. So he is going to be going now onto a second week worth of second-place finishes.
Pit window is now closed.
As we hear it there, the pit window is closer. That's what he was timing it up for. He wanted to be as close as he could to that pit window shutting before he played his last set of cards. Well, as it stands then, after the last pit stop of this race and just under 15 minutes left to go, Zalan Such leads here in Bathurst with David Tanguay in second, Wright in third, and Christian LeBay in fourth. Brooklyn Donkin rounds out the top 5 of the remaining and surviving Pro category drivers. Leading the AMs then, Sergio Belda of Hulkianos Motorsports, Karina Stinson looking at her first ever podium in World Series history. Badensky currently third with Let's Race Mate, turning their fortunes around on what has been a very up and down race for the team at the moment. Danny Felix makes 4th in division, and Casey Miles looks at their chances of a first top 5 appearance. This not only marks Aston Martin's first top 5, but also their first top 3, courtesy of Stinson up in 2nd in division. Cedric Grenier-Massey in 6th with JM Quito 7th, Sanchez in 8th, and Veldkamp in 9th. Soft DNFs then from both Stephen Black, and as it would appear, re-emerging to the field then is Didier Potvin, despite having 2 stops left to go, of which he cannot serve because the pit window is shut. Evidently a sighting lap then for the 35. Just wanted to see the checkered flag. Such 8.8 seconds over Tanguay at the moment. As we catch back in with him in his ascent uphill. Down through Skyline. That gap is continuing to grow there. 8 seconds now, 9 between Such and Tanguay at the front row of the grid. Just under 13 minutes left to go for these drivers, so we're in the ballpark coming up on it of about 6 more laps at a push here before the end of racing here in Bathurst and the end of round 8 of the World Series. Then only 2 more rounds left to go before the season is out. The next round coming up in the Hungaroring, a 3x40, so 3 races for the price of 1 round. This still keeps things very interesting in the conversation of Lebey's chances at the forefront of the Pro Championship, because Tanguay and Such now gaining a leg up over him here. And as for Wright, also gaining a leg up. So for Lebey, it's a case where he's being outscored by a lot of his direct competitors. Now, in the case of Zalan Such, in this round, he drops down to 7th, but in the absence of Kyle Jenkins and the fact that he's outscoring right now that of Brooklyn Donkin is going to see him more than likely back up into that top 5. Jonas Franke, as it happens, is not in today's round either, meaning he'll drop down a considerable chunk of the order in today's race. All of this could very well bring Zalan Such back into the top 5, and it could make for a much tighter top 5 for the run in towards Hungaroring's 3x40 round next weekend. In terms of nearby fights, there are simply, at this time, just not many, if any, to talk about. We now find a case here where the drivers have prioritised survival over everything. But of the grid that remains, where they are about to see some fantastic results across both championships here. Bathurst is not an easy circuit by any stretch of the imagination. Rookie drivers and veterans alike will struggle under the anvil that is this circuit. Checking around the field then to see a few different angles. There is recent trouble for one such driver. Yellow flags out of the moment for the 35. Didier Potvin in continued struggles here. We see the extent of the damages on the 35 Mustangs. He makes his way down through to the run of things at Forest's elbow. Damaged condition there for Potvin. The number 35 came back out onto the field in spite of the fact that he cannot serve his remaining 2 pit stops. As it would happen then, damaged by the mountain once again. Seeing here for Brooklyn Donkin, it's a bittersweet performance for him today because he has had brilliant strategy, but it all came undone in that second half of the race. The damage on his car forced him into the pit lane. Ultimately kept him away of what could have been second place for him today. Will still settle in a top 5 position. Not too bad at all for Donkin. Will keep him fresh in the conversation of the top 5 of the championship as it happens then, just not the result he was gunning for. The strategy certainly had it on point for him to be second by the end of this race, but complications after that first pit stop is what's kept him from that throughout today's round. 8 minutes left to go. In the case of the number 45, as he approaches the line, that's 4 laps remaining in today's race. At a push. The Aston Martin of Karina Stinson. The case now where she just has to keep her head low and out of trouble the next couple of laps, and she will see her first podium in the Competizione Performance League World Series, her best result of the season, and will more than likely, in this case, with so many casualties today, bring her into that top 10 for the run in towards Hungaroring at round 9 of the championship. Sergio Belda, it's been squeaky clean for him throughout today. Not a foot wrong, dominant control of the AM category for Holkianos Motorsports. Looking at an outright win for him in the AMs. No competition involved. Very, very capable driver in the number 65, and it has been a brilliant performance for him today. We see here for Brooklyn Donkin just taking things nice and easy now, knowing he's done what he could in this race, but now it's just about surviving it and coming home with a top 5. You see, in the absence of many of the drivers who started on what was a 21-car grid, has left far, if anything, to discuss action-wise in the pro category, the maiden category of this championship, where the majority of those close fights end up happening. It's all quiet on the pro front. Onto the Conrod straight then for Donkin. 6 minutes left to go in this race. Zelan Such making his way down through to Murray's corner. So he's got about 3 more laps here roughly before the end of today's race. At a touch 4. He'd really have to hammer the track now in the next couple of laps to make that possible. We'll catch on with him later on when we get in towards the look of those final laps. In terms of looking forward to the road ahead then, as we do come in towards the closing couple of laps of this round, and we'll bring this back up again once the race is over, but heading in towards May 16th next weekend, we'll be heading over to the Hungaroring, the 3x40 round. Now, we saw in Barcelona that it's given us quite a fair few new winners over in the AM category, so it could be payday for them once again in our third and final installation of the 3x40 layout here in the World Series. We'll see how that comes to light over in the Hungaroring. And I think it's been very tactical with those placements of the 3x40s. They picked tracks that are quite well-rounded. So nothing that's too straight line intensive, nothing that's too corner intensive. Great balanced tracks like Silverstone, like Barcelona. And I'd say even at a push like Hungaroring, though I'd say that teeters closer to being a more corner intensive track over the last two. But it still provides rife opportunities for racing in this series. And that's going to be certainly quite exciting to see how that all unfolds for these drivers at the home of the Hungarian Grand Prix. Zelan Such, there's going to be pressure at an all-time high for performance there. That'll be his home race this season. And seeing with Such at the moment, 4.5 minutes left to go in this race. We'll catch on with him in that last lap. Now, taking a look here, Matthew Badensky into the pit lane in the number 505 BMW. That could, at a pinch here... Oh, what's going on here for Danny Felix? We saw a bit of trouble for him on that opening straight. As for Danny Felix right now, making his way down through turn 1, is that going to give him the opportunity to go up to third in division? Of course, Felix, who last week saw a race win for the first time in what was a very chaotic triple header in Barcelona, could be within a shot there of the podium. We'll wait for the data to update properly, as it is a little bit slow on the uptake. Badensky now out of the pits, but still nursing that front end damage on his 505. We'll go to check in. Oh, hang on here, trouble for Andrew Veldkamp. This is off of, looking here, Murray's as it would happen. I think he's just found himself a little bit of a scenic spot to watch the rest of the field from. It's actually not too bad a place at all. He's got a good view there out through Murray's, and he's found the runoff here. Three minutes left to go then here in Bathurst. As for Brooklyn Donkin, he's got company there from the 26 JM Keto down in 12th. Keeping him company for the last couple of laps of today's race. Yes, we do have confirmation then that Danny Felix has now moved to third in the AM category, up and ahead of Matthew Badensky with Let's Race Mates number 505 car. It's a very curious case that brought him into the pits, because clearly it would have been to repair damages, but he's still got those damages, so he's not repaired anything in the pit lane. So was it more a consideration of just getting fuel on the car? It's not strategy intensive, or perhaps the case as well. We don't know 100% how the intricacies of it works, but was it a case where it's a lot more of a literal definition when the pit lane closes because they weren't going to fix the car? 2 minutes left to go in this race, and we see Zalan Such. There is still enough time here in the tank for one more lap thereafter. We weren't given confirmation that he was on his final lap, so we'll be monitoring that situation as it proceeds. But with him 12 seconds up the road from David Tangway, pumping the brakes just to lose a few seconds could net him the win earlier. We'll see, though, what strategy he chooses to implement. Right across the line then, in the number 54, looking on for a podium today. The three of the main competitors to the lead of this championship in the pros, all outscoring LeVay. Albeit it won't be enough to dethrone him, but it will be enough to bring things far closer in the conversation leading up towards Hungaroring's triple header next week. As for Sergio Belda, this is going to be payday for him. That 31-point gap that he had between himself and Richard Cecil is going to slim down dramatically, and even add a push here could put him in the lead of the AMs for the run in towards the Hungaroring triple header. For Karina Stinson, this has been nothing short of a perfect drive for the V12, rectifying a lot of the wrongs over the course of this season in terms of vehicle control, in terms of consistency. All of those targets have been met head on here by the number 800. She has done remarkably well. Given the troubles she had with the car earlier this season, to see her now fight upon the podium is quite the contrast, I will say. It's wonderful to see a driver develop the way that she has. We've seen many drivers come up through the ranks to do so. I think one of the best examples I can name off the top of my head was Sean McNally, sorry. I always struggle with that surname. Sean McNally over on VSR. I think that was one of the best examples we had. We saw him come up through Season 8 in the bronze category. We saw him go on to take the Bronze Division Championships, move up into silver, and now he's a capable driver in silver. And we've seen, even after that point there, he's still had some fantastic performances. So it's great to see driver development this far in. We also get word there Zalan Such is now on to his final lap, so he was willing to keep the throttle pinned and had plenty enough time to go in for one last blast here in Bathurst. We'll go to catch on board then with Zalan Such for one last go around here in Bathurst, and what has been a brilliant round for him here. And nursing that front end damage, minor as it may be, up through McPhillamy Park he goes for the last time here in Bathurst. That 5.4 litre V8 rattling the air for one last go down the corner on straight here in the Mount Panorama circuit for round 8 of the championship. Only a few corners away then from returning to winning form. Of his limited number of appearances in this championship, the worst result he's ever seen was second place, but the greater majority tells us the same result. It's been first, more so than anything else for Zalan Such, and as it would appear, making his way down towards the line, that is the status quo that shall remain here in Bathurst. Down to the line then at the end of round 8, Zalan Such wins in Bathurst. Textbook performance here by Zalan. Couldn't expect anything else from him from the word go. Shattered the ceiling in qualifying on what was an unmistakable drive today. David Tanguay takes second with Wright in third, as it would appear there for the pros. Lebay in fourth, and as it's going to stand there for Donkin, is looking at fifth place. Sergio Belda is expected to the line not long from now to see home then another victory. His second in AM this season. Not far then from the line as well is Stinson to see her first ever podium in this series. We see for Lebay then across the line for fourth to round out the pro grid. Next expected to the line then Sergio Belda. And you'll have to forgive the slight inaccuracy of saying that he's pro, as he is an AM driver. We'll see him though down to the line. Nonetheless, the 65 from Holkianos wins in astonishing form here in the AMs here in Bathurst. What a performance he's had over the course of this race. We'll see then down to the line, reveling in the joys of a first ever podium and a first ever top 5, a formation finish for Aston Martin. Second for Karina Stinson and fifth for Casey Malz. Danny Felix looks to wrap out the podium then with Matthew Badensky solidifying a fourth place spot. What a performance that has come to be for these drivers over the course of today. Zalan Such, flawless. Sergio Belda, flawless. And as we've seen as well for Karina Stinson, flawless. That is quite a gratifying feeling for Aston Martin to see them finally come back up into form, both in the real world and the virtual world over the course of the last 24 hours. To give you some context on that one, we, over the course of this stream, were given the live results of the 6 hours of Spa, where Aston Martin, the heart of racing, in the 009 Valkyrie, secured a top 5. And now, mirroring the qualities in the real world, Aston Martin claim a second and fifth for the first time ever in the World Series. For both of these drivers, that's their best result ever. So joy and jubilations for Aston Martin, joy and jubilations for Lexus and Ford as well, reveling in a win once again for Zalan Such and a second win of the season for Sergio Belda. What a performance there. The final results through: Such wins in Bathurst, Tanguay second and Wright in third, Lebay fourth and Donkin in fifth. Sergio Belda wins in AM with Stinson in second, Felix in third, Badensky fourth, Malz fifth, Grenier Masse in sixth, Quito seventh, Sanchez eighth and Veldkamp in ninth. We get to see there the remaining results and all of your DNFs, and technically having, yes, seen the checkered flag, but with a 130-second penalty is Didier Potvin. We see from the DNFs, though, Christie, Cheeseman, Black, Jenkins, Cecil, and Nikolai. A brutal race then here in Bathurst, but one that has had quite the silver lining at the end of racing today. Great job then. So the 45 and 65, your race winners of today, Zalan Such and Sergio Belda. That's all from us here this week. If you're joining us for our next broadcast, that'll be tomorrow. Not tomorrow, actually. No, I get way ahead of myself. That'll be Monday. Monday evening, we go back on with the folks over at Fatch GT for yet another round of Season 10. What has been a brilliant season for them so far. We'll pick up on action with them at the start of next week. Then on Tuesday evening, we get back in with the folks over at the Racing Club for the TRC GT Manufacturers Cup. We pick up on round 6, round 7, and round 8 for the next 3 weeks thereafter. We're back in with the GT4 Pro-Am Cup this coming week. And we're also picking back up with the folks over at VSR. As we get closer and closer to the season end, we'll be heading to Bathurst with them for the penultimate round this coming week. That's all from us here on TRTN. What a performance we've seen today then here in Bathurst. Brilliant job then to Such and Belda. An honorary mentions there to Tanguay, Wright, Stinson and Felix, your podium sitters across both categories. Great, great stuff today. That's all from us here on TRTN. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Take care and good night.